if everything looks like it's coming up, or if there's too much lag or something, or stuff. Ta-ding! What's up, guys? How's it going? Welcome to the thing.
Yellow, yellow. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Let me know if there's any lag on that second frame or anything weird like that. Hey, Alan's back. Happy Friday evening, Alan. It is a little bit smoky, eh? Thankfully, most of the smoke is in the clouds, so at least it's giving us an extra pretty sunset. Yeah. It's not ideal, but yes, it is a little bit smoky. So we're gonna jump into this next thing. Thankfully, my wife is here, and so if you guys have any questions while I'm jumping into this, while I'm drawing, rendering, anything like that, please feel free to ask. Is it, you got any lag? You good?
Did Alan say something over there?
Yeah.
I'm not showing on mine.
It'll probably come up faster on mine because I'm the one streaming and you're the one watching after the fact. You're welcome to come around and check it, but it should come up at a slightly different rate. Anyways, I'm gonna just jump right into this. Happy Friday, Alan, and hello, Jesus.
Come on, man.
You also got to pull up the chat. Sometimes it's disabled. Did you find it?
Yeah, it's right there.
Okay, there's probably just some delay. So I've already got a good pen sketch going here while my lady is waiting to sort out the chat. There's probably just a delay. It's all good. It happens.
Got it.
Cool.
There's a different thing. Why is there a different? It said top chat or live chat.
I know, right?
Why did I want that?
We've got a good sketch going on here. I'm going to go ahead and carefully rip this guy out of the binder. Hopefully. Oh, that was so much shit in the way.
Oh, I thought something happened.
Nope. Sorry.
It's hard to tell from where I'm sitting.
Yeah. So we'll pull that guy out of the binder and get started on this fresh pad here. Actually, I'm gonna remove this particular piece of paper and bring this sketch around. Sorry, I should have done all this already so that I have a fresh sheet to work on. And normally I work on these renderings in the binding, but today we're going to change things up a little bit because of the paper type. Excuse me one sec while I make lots of paper noises.
What is the paper type?
The paper type, as with a lot of the things that I work on, is a marker paper. This is a particular type of marker paper. It's the exact one that I used in the last live feed as I was getting started on something and realized that I was using the paper incorrectly. That happens from time to time. Not all marker papers are made the same. This one is, some papers are intended to use one side, some are intended to use both sides, some are two-sided, but you don't know which side is the correct side. Sometimes marker papers are bound upside down as well. So you have to test to figure out which side is which. And you might be able to tell this is a pretty thin, transparent paper, so you get a lot of show-through, which is good. And you can work both sides if you know how to. Thankfully, I'm slightly more prepared on this one than the last one, so I'll know to do that on purpose. Is the stream looking okay? Is there a bit of lag, or?
No, it's fine. I was being silly before.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure it's good, because like I said, I'll kill that second window if it seems like it's killing stuff. But anyways, I'm just going to jump right into it. I already know what colors everything's going to be. I've already got airbrush paints pre-mixed. I'm going to try to jam through this one quickly, just like I say about every single one that I'm working on. But I'm going to change this one up a little bit. I'm going to go a little bit heavier with airbrushing and relieve some of the early marker stages and just jump into the slightly harsher stuff and see, so you guys can kind of see what that process looks like. It's essentially the same process, but I'm skipping a couple of early steps that by using airbrush more in a different stage. So you'll see what that's all about and why I ended up going to a full plate as a background instead of working in the binding. So this particular Volkswagen bug, I already know that I'm going to render black, so I'm just going to go ahead with the deepest color here and start making some of these passes.
Yeah, Alan says the drawing looks great to start with.
Thank you.
Creative Goddess said, hello everyone, happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
And Roberto said, yep, no doubt about it. Happy Friday to you too. And Jesus says the stream looks good.
Thank you. Okay, cool. Yeah, sometimes I never know, like one way it looks on my screen versus everybody else. You gotta make sure it's okay. Because I watched streams before that just were horrific, and I think nobody was telling them like there was too much lag or something like that, which happens. You know, we're at the mercy of streaming data half the time.
There's only so much streaming that can happen.
That's right. So I'm just starting in with solid black. Like I said, I already know I'm going to render the vehicle black, and the way reflections happen on a dark color, and the darkest color here, for example, is very specific. And to me, this is actually one of the easier colors to render, just because the way black reflections look is sort of simplified. In some ways, it's actually busier. But I'll try to get into it more as I'm doing more bits and pieces. The initial color block isn't very exciting to watch, but it's necessary because I'm going to use the marker to block out the largest shapes and get the most coverage, and then I'll use the airbrush to do all the transition work. Sometimes I would use marker for some of the initial blending, and like I said, we're going to skip that on this one and do all of the blending with airbrush and just see if that saves us some time or what we get out of it. There's always some compromise in changing technique. I generally don't like to blend all marker anyways, because it can just really muddy up the paper and change the look into something that isn't my favorite. So you have to be careful with that anyways. Yeah, and as I mentioned in a previous vid, when you're using marker like this, you do have to be pretty fast and deliberate about the strokes. You don't want to be guessing.
My creative guy said, glad to see you in the chat on, is it Lacry?
Yeah.
Lacry's live streams.
Yeah, I was watching her live stream earlier today as I was getting prepped for this. Her live streams are so fun and really, really informative. You know, on days that she actually gets to do artwork. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. So just starting to make some of the shapes. The way reflections work on any surface has a lot to do with the shape of the surfaces and the contours. So you wouldn't want to just do straight line shapes across everything. You know, the side panels are relatively straight, so a long reflection will look good. But the fenders are bubble shaped. So, or at least, you know, in the simplest terms, they are bubble shaped. So you want the contours, you want the color blocks to reflect those contours. So in a lot of cases it might be more helpful to have a reference. I rarely use references for lighting and stuff like this because I want to do it on my own. I want to kind of make it look the way I want to make it look. So a lot of this I'm just really doing from memory. I have a 69 Volkswagen, so it's a little bit easier to remember, but yeah, and if you hear that airplane taking off in the background, that's my computer.
So, trying to fly away.
Yeah. It's so warm. We're asking it to do an awful lot right now. So, and also you notice I'm jumping back and forth in between areas. And part of the reason for that is letting areas dry. Marker is a very fast medium, but you can oversaturate paper. And this particular type of marker, which is chart packs, they are xylene based, so they're really, really aggressive in the first place. So you don't want to oversaturate an area, and you don't want to keep making a whole bunch of passes and keep trying to pick up lines. The lines will just feather and grow, and it'll continually get worse. So don't do that. So being careful, like if you need to pick up a line somewhere, let the area dry a little bit, and then come back to it. If you're doing everything while it's continuously wet, it'll just continue to spread and feather and get worse and worse. So now I'm putting in where I think the reflection for the top of the car will go in the hood, because you'll always have a bit of top-down reflection. And again, since I'm gonna do a lot more heavy lifting with the airbrush, I'm trying to be a lot more deliberate about how these shapes look in one solid color. And you could use like French curves or ship's curves to kind of get these basic lines that I'm doing a bit more accurate. Obviously I'm freehanding them, so it is what it is. But I tend to like the look of free-handed marker work anyways. So that's what I do.
Creative Goddess wants to know, why do you decide to not use reference? You must have some immense intimacy with the subject matter.
That is definitely true. I mean, I've drawn a lot of vehicles. So there's certainly not a lack of, you know, being able to remember what everything looks like. I actually try to memorize vehicles a lot when I'm working on them, because I don't like staring at reference photos all the time. Because if, say if I'm doing design work, if I'm staring at reference photos too much, then I'm not leaving myself enough space to be creative. I'm trying to abide too much to the reference, and that can show in the final artwork. Now you might think, well, wouldn't you want something that looks super accurate? Yeah, there's certainly a case for that, but it's generally not my job to print out photos of cars. You can take a photo and print them out. That's a much faster way to do that. So what I'm aiming to do is something that isn't in a photograph in the first place. So at some point, I think even with photorealism, you need to relieve yourself of the reference at some point. You have to depart and make some color decisions on your own. Now I'm saying this from the point of view of concept artwork. I can get away with a lot more on this than if I'm doing a portrait of somebody. That is an area where I probably wouldn't want to have any guesswork.
Alan is asking, do you find that rendering foreground surfaces first is better than working from background to foreground?
I don't really have an all-the-time method for that. It depends on what I'm doing. If I'm doing a painting, then I'm going to work, I wouldn't want to say I'm working the entire background at first, but I am working like a ground color and taking the background into account. But a lot of times in the case of rendering to something like this, anything that's going to be interesting in the background is going to get done at the end. Sometimes I might take into account the warms and the cools before I get started, but like I said, in this one, I'm going to skip that for the sake of time, and so that I can do that mostly with airbrush, so you guys can have a better idea of what it looks like of just doing it that way, because you can do it anyway, there's no wrong way. But for what I do, there's always a sense of urgency because everything needs to be done yesterday. So I'm always in the pursuit of the fastest answer because that's more or less what people expect of me anyways. Just jotting in some of these shapes here. Like I said, a lot of this is going to be picked up from airbrush anyway, so I'm going to give myself a good foundation for all these shapes to work into. And while that's drying, I'm going to switch over to a gray to start to hit in some of these interior areas real quick. And it probably is going to look black, but it is actually gray, I promise. Yeah, and I always want to try to make these passes as quick and clean as possible. I see a lot of people, when you're using markers, do too many pickups, which means like start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. Every time you do that, the overlap will show through, and it doesn't look as clean. So you want to be way more deliberate. You know, in the case of like what I do, I'll outline an area and then I'll fill it in. And you can go the opposite way. You could fill in the area and then do the outline. But I think it's nice to kind of make the structure so that you know what the target is for how much needs to be filled. Really quickly do an outline so it doesn't feather too much, and then fill that in.
It's also better for your line work too, to do just one straight stroke, like instead of doing like little mini pen and or marker strokes. It's cleaner.
Way
just do
cleaner.
One stroke, really swift, back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah. So it's a good thing to even practice and just get in the habit of.
Yeah.
Because yeah, line work that looks like it has a million pickups in it, like the thing that I always refer to as tattoos. You can always tell when somebody isn't as great at tattooing. That's okay. We're all on a journey. But understand your tools and understand how to use them the most effectively. So the least amount of passes to get where you want is important, which is a big part of why I don't really like to use French curves or ship's curves for this stage, because it's too rigid and it's a little too accurate. I know that sounds really silly, but I find it's true.
Jesus is asking, have you ever drawn a semi-truck?
I have in the past. It's not like something I do a lot of or specialize in. And I've had requests to do them, but stuff like that is something like somebody would have to be paying me to do it, because it's not likely that I'm going to be like, I feel like doing a semi-truck today. I think they are cool, but the amount of work that would go into an illustration for them would be more than what I could fit in for like content creation that day or something like that. So it's not something I would be doing willy-nilly, that's for sure. So I'm just putting a little bit of gray tone in a couple little spots. I don't want to get too carried away. I want to leave a lot of space for airbrush, but actually this particular marker is behaving, so we'll get just a little bit in there, not too much. And a lot of times you might notice with marker work, you can, let's say I put black down first, obviously, and then using this gray, which is a number 3, it's actually a pretty light gray. You can actually pick up the black with the gray and be able to make a darker pass just because you're essentially contaminating the edge with another value, which is great. It's actually useful if you do it on purpose.
Do you have a favorite car to draw?
Not exactly. I do really like variety. So we do love classic Ferraris. I love pickup trucks, even though I'm not like an owner of a pickup truck anymore. I like drawing them just because it's kind of nostalgic for me. Because I used to have, well, I've had a number of classic Chevy trucks. But I don't know that I necessarily have a favorite, really. There's so much that I like. I wouldn't even know where to begin. Days of work that really excite me or is when somebody asks me to do something different than I would normally get asked to do. I love a good challenge. Let's see, actually, go ahead and get a little bit of gray in there.
Oh, I like that, yeah. Alan is wondering what is the best way to contact you to discuss contract work, and what is your lead time?
The best way is through email. A lot of times we hear from people through like Instagram or something like that, and I get buried in messages. It's impossible to keep up with everything. So email is always there, always easy to find. And as far as lead time, it kind of depends on the project, because a lot of what I do is design work, and that stuff is pretty long term, which is great. But there's always somebody asking that just wants a portrait, something that's already done, and sometimes that's a little bit easier to fit in with stuff that we're already working on. So it really depends on the project itself. I'm doing a little bit more gray than I had planned, but it's all right. I think you guys will forgive me. But we'll start to get a little bit of shape early on here. I'm going to leave myself enough space to airbrush. And the next thing I want to do is actually start on the wheels. So generally I just prefer to use marker to base out areas and then transition into that. I'm going to show you guys real quick, and I'm not going to do this stage yet, but the reverse side of the paper, of this particular type of marker paper. Come on. There we go. So you can actually see through the bleed through on the back. And you would think, man, wouldn't it be bad? Like, obviously, this paper, I specifically grabbed a clean sheet so that it could capture all the bleed through. And you hear about marker papers that are considered bleed proof or whatnot. That's actually not great. You actually want a little bit of bleed so that you can push marker and let it feather. If you're markering on a surface that has no bleed, then it really has nowhere to go. And there's a case for something like that, like vellum, for example, where that's practical and usable, but it has its limits. So, which is, I think I said in the last video, the reason I use 10 different papers is because each of them kind of has a purpose and a way that they can be used appropriately depending on the needs of a certain project or a demo or something like that. So at some point I'll do a little bit of the marker on the back as well to bring the contrast around. This isn't as two-sided as, say, genuine vellum, but I know from the last demo that we did, you can absolutely use both sides. And I did. I always do like a test here myself. And I did that earlier today and I was like, oh yeah.
Creative Goddess wants to know, it would probably be fun to watch you draw a concept car like a Monkey Mobile or the Batmobile.
Yeah.
He's actually, I don't know if any of you guys have ventured on the website. I don't even know if it's still there, but a year or two ago he did the Plan Express.
Oh yeah.
From Futurama.
Yeah. I don't know if that is still up there.
I don't know, because I know he ran out of prints.
Yeah.
But you know, it's something that we really love. We love Futurama. We love watching the show, and it was just a fun vehicle idea to basically do the Futurama spaceship. It's just ship, right? It doesn't have a name.
Yeah, I think they just call it ship. Yes, that is true. There's actually a lot of artwork that I do that either I don't post about a lot or I don't post about at all. And a lot of that stuff is personal interest stuff. There's so much that I like that I don't get to share, which seems sort of counterintuitive, but it is a reality. Not everything that I'm interested in, people on social media aren't necessarily interested in, so that's okay. But I like the idea of doing like movie vehicles and concept stuff. Actually, I have a great idea for a movie vehicle in a video that I want to do for Monday, but gotta see how my weekend goes. We'll see.
I still wanna. Did you do a Chevy Impala recently?
Not recently.
But it was a color, right? It wasn't. I'm just thinking of the Supernatural. They wrapped up filming the final last episodes are in October. So
yeah.
It'd be cool to do one of Baby.
That's true. That is true.
Chevy Impala. Just putting that out there.
Yeah. So I'm just basing out some of the wheel areas a little bit. I'm doing a lot less with marker than I normally would. Normally I would put in some warms and cools, but I specifically want to do those with airbrush this time. That way we can kind of change up the process, because I hate the idea of these demo videos being the same thing over and over again. And in some ways they will be. I'm essentially demoing how to do this, but I'm going to change up the method sometimes so you guys can see the variation in between stuff. And actually, real quick, I bet it'll work. So on the back side, let's say you can see all the values that I have. I'm going to use the same exact gray again. And we'll just add like a slight core in these areas. And actually, while I'm there, I'll go ahead and do the same with the red, because you get more saturation if the color exists on both sides. And this is not something they teach you in school.
This is true.
Yeah, this is like,
I can test that.
this is incredibly old school, so it's unusual that it would be practical. So it's probably hard to see on camera, but there is a nice little slight variation in the value there, which if you wanted to do all your transitions with markers, working on both sides can be really, really great. Not all papers are capable of that, but this one is. And well, this one is to some degree. It's not in totality. Base in the window gloss real quick. And I'll leave that because I'm going to do that with an airbrush. Let's see. Just kind of looking at everything, seeing where everything's balanced and what needs what. So, because I want to do as much of the marker as possible before airbrushing. You can airbrush over marker, but it changes the looks of the dynamics a little bit, so you want to be a bit more deliberate in the order of things that you go. But you can do that way. I just prefer not to. I'd like to be done with the marker stage, then do the airbrush stage, and then be doing details. But some of the larger areas that do need marker, like the lower shadow and the tires, I'll do after airbrush, so I can airbrush into it, let the overspray go into those areas, and then essentially cover it with marker in the end. So, without further ado, I'm going to take this sheet down so it doesn't blow away while I'm airbrushing. Because actually, that's as much marker as we need for what I'm imagining.
And you're not going to need to airbrush on the back at all, so you're good.
Which you actually can.
Oh.
So, but for some of the subtle changes in here, it won't be necessary. A color like black isn't almost the best example for how to do this. That's okay. We're going to run with it. Too late. We already started. So I've already got colors pre-mixed. Got a little bit of acrylic here, airbrush, and stir. Grab my cap. And I've always got a test sheet here to make sure that all this stuff is functioning correctly.
Forget about it. Said it's a good tip to do coloring on the back.
It's really, really useful, and like I said, it's not a tip that's mentioned often when you look for tips of this type of artwork. Not all papers are capable of it. The sheet that I'm using, this marker paper on the back, is not capable of it. It's actually a very specific coated paper that does not allow you to do that. So I'm just going to start airbrushing in the transitions. I mix the black a little bit heavy so that I'll get good coverage out of it. But right away you can see in like no time we already have a softer blend than we would ever get with markers. And just like that, that's basically done. So carrying on, I'm going to do all the same with the other transition areas. Now normally some of these upper areas I would put a little bit of blue down first, but I'm going to do that as a secondary in this particular instance. I'm going to let that be the stage I do afterwards. Just being really careful to keep things light, again, because I mix this black a little bit heavy, but I want to get good coverage out of it. If you mix the paints too thin, you'll have to make a million passes. The more passes you make, the more overspray you get, and the more likely you are to warp the paper anyways. So finding that balance between opacity and how fine the mist is, very important. And obviously on these upper surfaces here, I'm going to go a little bit lighter so I can get a gray out of it, because I don't want to go full black on these surfaces. The upper surfaces are going to have the harshest reflections, while these sides, you still want them to be gray, but they need to be deeper than the tops. The tops generally have the brightest reflections. Not always, but you know, if we're making up our own rules here, that's the rules that we're going to apply. And of course, you want to apply the same rules uniformly. You don't want to mix up how you're doing lighting in the middle of something. So one of the reasons I didn't want to do any like marker down here, didn't want to do too much gray, is because of what can be considered color shift. The black that I'm using is slightly warm, and the markers I was using were slightly cool. So in order to keep everything grounded and feel like it's in the same family, I'm going to go lightly over all the gray marker that I already did, so that it looks like it came from the same color temperature, which is really important. If you start mixing color temperatures in a way that doesn't make sense, it'll look really accidental and amateurish. You do not want that. I'm just going to hit a little bit of transition up here. I probably should have mixed a little bit of blue with the black that I've got, which I oftentimes do, but I wanted to kind of do something in a really, really traditional way. So I'm going to put the blue on afterwards, which is part of why I'm going a little bit light with this paint, which is just transparent black. It's not literally gray, but we're putting a transparent black over top of a white surface. So of course, what we're going to get is gray. Being careful to really, really layer gently and from a distance so that the paper doesn't warp. But already we've got a lot more depth and a lot more shape coming through, which is great. You might have to go back and forth with the black and the blue, we'll see. I'll try to keep this stuff tight enough to where I can put enough blue down later and it makes sense, but kind of just have to get to that stage to see. So it's a delicate balancing act of don't get too carried away in each stage to where you have no space to go backwards. You get that a whole lot richer so the contrast is a little bit better. You can see I've got overspray coming into the fender wells, and I like to have that. I could have done the marker black, but it won't make any difference because I'm rendering a black vehicle. But generally I usually wait to do the fender wells till afterwards anyways. Let's go a little bit darker on the window here, but I gotta leave myself some space to get some blue in there. This core reflection a little bit tighter. And I normally don't do very much masking with these types of illustrations anyways. I just like doing everything freehand, and I did custom airbrushing for many years before I was doing these illustrations full time. So it's just something I already know how to do. So just being careful and deliberate. And sort of like taking my time, but also working quickly. Alright. That's a pretty good spot there where it's feeling pretty good and balanced. So I'm going to clean out the black. I'm going to grab some blue and start to get the upper surface shine the way that I want. Actually, I'm going to do just a little bit in these wheels. Not much. I don't want to overdo it.
Do you have a favorite color?
Do I have a favorite color?
Yeah.
As far as like overall, or for a car, or?
Well, Jesus just says, what's your favorite color?
I have so many favorite colors.
I like purple.
Yeah. I'm going to use a little bit of purple on this car.
Yay!
I have a lot of favorites. I like so many colors. And just as well, there aren't colors that I really don't like either. They all look good.
I don't like mustard yellow.
You don't like mustard yellow?
Yeah.
Well, I really like yellow, but not all yellows look good, so
Yeah.
that's okay. So I'm going to switch out the black real quick. Find some water, clean out the airbrush, and we'll switch over to blue. And there could be a case made for flipping it over and doing some airbrushing on the back. You could actually do that, but this type of color doesn't really call for it so much. You know, you could do the glass or some of the wheel tones. Maybe in the end I'll do that way. We'll see. But yeah, because this color is so simplified, there's not a whole lot of reason to. But we use the back. We will use the back for party illustration for sure.
I want to know if a black vehicle generally is more difficult to render than, say, other colors.
I actually think the black is the easiest color to render.
Because it can cover up a lot, right?
Yeah, and, just the color dynamics are really, really simple. You have to take a little bit of color shift into account, but not nearly as much as, say, a green vehicle. So it depends. All things depend. But generally, I actually think black and red vehicles are the easiest. So always do a test to make sure the airbrush is happy. And it is in a great mood today, which is a relief. It's not always. So now that I got some blue, I've tested it. I know it's basically ready to explode. I'm going to go ahead and work a little bit of blue just in the upper surfaces. And the reason for this should seem fairly obvious. The upper surfaces on a vehicle, on a glossy vehicle, should read cooler than the lower surfaces. Now I could have put this blue down first. I could have done this blue with marker. But like I said in the beginning part, I want to do the dynamics of this one differently so that you guys can just see that there's more than one approach that will still yield good results. There's no one way that everything has to be done, and I find myself changing things up all the time for variety, or I learn a new trick or something. So there's no reason for anyone ever watching a demo of mine to think that it's one way to do it and one way only. That's just absurd. But generally, I prefer to do as much of the color work and the blending with airbrush anyways. It's going to look better. And it's also going to be more vibrant.
Faith says it's looking really good.
Thank you.
Looks like, just like it was computer rendered in Illustrator, but of course it's not, and
Nice.
it's not even done yet.
So close.
All exclamation points!
That's fine. Thank you very, very much. And hopefully the color's coming up okay on the screen. As the top surfaces, at least from the way that I'm looking, as the top surfaces start to get cooler, it already looks like a much deeper paint job. At least to me. Just because it's starting to get that reflection where it looks really, really nice and deep and wet. And that's part of why I think that rendering black is a little bit simplistic as well. The deepest color is solid black in one of these vehicles. So it's very easy to get there and get the color read the way that you want. Versus lighter colors, like rendering a yellow or white, can be a bit challenging. Because you still have to get good contrast so that it doesn't look really flat. But getting there is a lot harder. So again, I just want to use this blue on the upper surfaces. I'm going to be really deliberate to kind of stay into the area that I already have black so that I'm color shifting that area. And I'm going to oversaturate and overshoot it just a little bit because I'd almost rather have too much than too little. It's an illustration after all, so I can push and bend some rules if I want. But another reason I didn't want to bury the upper surfaces in too much black is because the blue needs to be able to breathe through the white in order to read really good saturation. So if you put too much of black down, for example, there won't be enough clean surface underneath for the color for this blue to still feel saturated.
Jesus wants to know how long you've been drawing.
I've been drawing since elementary school, so many, many years. And even then I was drawing cars. Long time. What's that?
With crayons.
With crayons, that's right. On newsprint. as elementary school kids do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, drawing a long, long time. And at one point I was doing airbrushing full time, and another point I was doing pinstriping full time. So all these different things kind of add to the next stage of being able to do something like this. This is kind of everything in its finality. All these different people.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could say it.
I don't know, I need a flag or something.
No.
Don't know what the rules are on this platform.
I don't think they're that kind of people that they'd be mad. They'd be like, oh yeah, bad.
You said a bad word.
No.
I would never. So I want to make sure I get these really dark areas really nice and saturated. The saturation is also a big part of what's going to give you your gloss read. If I don't go far enough with the blue, then it also doesn't read good. And now actually that these upper surfaces are so cool, this neutral black actually is a little bit warm. So I'm going to just do a little bit of pass over in blue just to start to bring the temperature, the color temperature rather, into a ballpark that I'm after. I want to be careful and not overdo it because I don't want every surface to read blue, because eventually you'll just turn it into a very dark blue car. You don't want that either, or at least not accidentally. So everything that I think is going to be an upper surface I'm going to hit with this blue. Like I said, this could have been a stage that I did with marker early on. I actually like the look of this better. Sometimes when I'm doing blue as the initial passes and yellow as the initial passes for warm and cool bounce, all that stuff gets buried with airbrush later anyways. So it's a nice roadmap for how to do it, but ultimately if I was like, hey, how can I save some time, this is what I would do. I would just skip those steps and get right to here. So now I'm going to hit the wheels a little bit with the same blue, because the dishes are going to be polished, as is the cap. And normally I would get a little bit closer, but I don't want to hit my face on the camera here.
Yeah, don't do that.
It took so long to set up that if I messed it up, I'd be so upset with myself.
Markers would get thrown.
What's that?
Markers would get thrown. Disaster would follow.
So many things. So I'm just adding a little bit of cool to the upper surfaces for the cap and the wheel dishes. And of course I am getting overspray in areas that I don't necessarily want. I could be masking. But for the sake of time, I'm going to recapture all that stuff in detail later anyway, so I'm not overly worried about it. It'll all work out in the end. Just get a little bit more saturation here. And then I'm going to switch over to the next color. What's happening?
It sounded like you said next caller.
Next color.
Hi, you're live with WFRN.
You have reached this place. If you feel like you've reached this message in error, ha 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 ha. Yes. Or die trying. Alright. Just about got this blue shift to where I'm about happy with it. I'm constantly kind of going back and forth and looking over everything, making sure I've got a good balance going on, to make sure that I've got everything where I want, because also at this stage I want, if I'm going to clean out the blue, I want to be done with the blue. I don't want to have a reason to come back and do it, add more, unless I'm layering in a certain way. So there's definitely an argument to be made for that type of thing, but generally in efficiency, just try to get every step locked down to where you know you're done with that and can move on to the next thing. So I just want to get a little bit more. There might be an instance where I need a little bit more blue, but we'll see. Alright, so I'm going to switch the blue out. It's got a really nice, good, watery look. And so I'm going to clean out the blue and then switch over to a little bit of yellow.
Do you always leave the tires last when you're working?
I generally do, and I've seen... Sorry, that was the airbrush screaming. I'm dead! Probably should pay a little bit more attention. I do generally leave the tires and wheels for last, and I've seen artists that like to do them first, And it's not really my method. The reason that I leave them for last is because I want to make sure that the body and the color and everything is good before I even worry about any of that stuff. Because to me, the wheels and the shadow, that's cake. That's easy stuff compared to getting the body right. So if the body's not right, at least I haven't wasted time on those stages. But it's not a right or wrong for sure. Some people like to get that first so they feel like they knocked out the hardest part. I don't want to work around them also. I like being able to take along these marker streaks and the airbrush and let them fall into those areas and then worry about them later. Versus, you know, getting the wheels done and they're perfect and now I have to work around them to do these really careful, cautious marker strokes. So, you know, to each their own for sure. It's just not, I like to save them for last. Or closer to last. And it also is kind of nice because once you have the body done, and you're like, okay, now I'm going to add the wheels and the shadows. Then it like feels a bit more like a journey. The way Steve Stanford says it is he says, you know, we're building the car just like it would be built in the factory. Do the body first, you know, maybe start to assemble trim and put the wheels on and then it starts to sit on the ground. I guess if you started with a chassis, it would be in the reverse order. But hey, for the sake of this argument, just agree with me. So, with the airbrush clean, I'm going to switch over to an organic yellow.
Bye, Jesus. Nice chatting with you.
Hey, thanks for coming by. So, excuse me, I'm just going to grab a little bit of yellow, make sure the airbrush is still doing okay-ish. It's doing okay. Yeah, not great. This isn't the airbrush that I use for super fine detail or anything like that, so we give it a pass on not being perfect all the time. It's okay. But, yeah, because a lot of this stuff, especially in something like this, it isn't detail-oriented. It's mostly just fading large areas. So, there's a lot that can be forgiven. So I'm going to take this organic yellow and kind of come around what I think is going to be the lower areas. And I am going to come back in, obviously, and hit that with, you know, come back in with the shadow. And I might come back in with some more yellow to blend it in later. And the yellow might seem sort of arbitrary, but it's one of those colors that once you start to bounce it with everything, say like this bottom shadow here, then now we have like a ground reflection. But we don't want to get too carried away, because we don't want to make the vehicle yellow. So everything in little doses, that's enough to kind of help the color read the way that I want. And then the best use for the yellow is really for the chrome, so that we can get a really nice color bounce going. Because that's really what gives us a chrome or polished look, is the atmosphere colors bouncing around. And I find that these look best when you have the warm and the cool. If you could do everything in neutral, and it works too, but this just has a little bit more playfulness, it's a little bit more interesting, but you have to be careful with these not to oversaturate them, you know, because putting some solid yellow next to some solid blue, next to some solid red, you'll end up with a, you know, freaking Child's Play looking doll real quick. Those are 3 primary colors, so you have to be careful how you use them next to each other, for sure.
Why do you guys say Child's Play?
Oh, no.
You like portrait?
No. I'm just going to feather out the ground a little bit. I will end up coming back into some of this with a little bit of black towards the end, but hopefully you guys can already see we got a nice glow going where the yellow is reflecting, say, like the lower trim ring here, maybe a little bit in this headlight because it's pointed that way, and of course the bottom part of the cap, the inner part of the cap. So we just want to get the reflective surfaces to read. And everything, you know, some of these surfaces are rotating or coming around, so they're picking up the opposite of other ends, but that's kind of what gives us our gloss look. And stuff like this I can do without reference fairly easily because it's just gloss and reflections to me are a bit formulaic. Once you know the fundamentals of it, you can use it everywhere, and you don't require a reference for it. And also I see sometimes people doing these types of illustrations and they're painting in like trees and kids playing in the park and the reflection. And I mentioned this in a couple of videos because I find that stuff sort of aggravating to look at. If it's not in your illustration, it really shouldn't be. as a part of the reflection, because it starts to look a little bit confusing. You don't want that. I'm just going to get a little bit more core yellow in here, and then I'm going to switch over to red. The next thing I'm going to do is the transition in the wheels, and then we'll be about wrapped up with the airbrushing, and then we'll start to cut the wheels and tires and move on with our lives.
Move on.
Yeah.
And Roberto said, wow, spectacular, a good looking beetle. Do you add a protective layer after you finish rendering, like a dull coat, for example?
That's a very good question, and thank you very much. So I tend not to. I've experimented a little bit with it in the past, and I'll try to explain the best reasoning for that as simply as possible. And it mostly has to do with the nature of marker papers. So marker papers allow a lot of the ink to sit on top of the surface. Some of it will absorb into the paper, and a lot of it will sit on top. So if you like look over it at an angle, you'll see a little bit of sheen or something like that. And that might seem like a nuisance, but actually the benefit of what it does is it helps give a lot of contrast to the artwork you're doing. So it's kind of tricky to explain. So when you put a fixative on it, especially a matte fixative, you dull down all the saturation that you have. So it's great as a protective thing, but you actually kill all the colors by doing it, because say this airbrush, for example, all this is sitting on top of the paper, so it's actually more vibrant this way than if it was absorbed in, which is part of why I like to airbrush and not marker necessarily. The airbrush will absolutely yield you way more vibrant results. But if you put a fixative on it that's matte, then you're going to kill back the saturation big time. You'll even it out, but it's a compromise. Now, the other side of that is, what if you used a gloss fixative? And that also has a different set of problems. Now you're adding lots of little dots of shininess because it's an aerosol, and that's better, I think, than the matte, but if you had to photograph the artwork, it's a nightmare. Alright, so what did I just say I was going to... Oh, red. Went off a little tangent there.
What were you doing? I don't know.
We'll never know. So, switching over to the next color. So it is a good idea to use some type of fixative in general for any type of artwork. I consider more of this stuff a little bit more concept artwork than like final artwork. If I know that I'm going to do a vehicle that's exactly like this and somebody wants a proper portrait of it, I'll just do it as a painting on canvas or on illustration board, a much more rigid surface. Marker papers and bond papers are really, really thin. They're not great for age in the first place, so it's just about which set of compromises you want to live with, I guess. So, I'm going to jump in here and start to create the transition area for the wheel. I'm being really careful to kind of keep the overspray as tight as possible, so that I don't get too much into the cap or into the fender, because those already have decided colors on them. Is that one of our dogs panicking?
Yep.
Yeah, it's darn doggos. So, I guess I don't really have any to add on that side, so I'm just going to get the core color a little bit darker here, just by really carefully making some passes with this red. I'm sure it's coming up as a pink, but it's actually just a very, very light red. Try to dry it a little bit with some air here. Always with the dog panicking. Alright, so the core color looks really good. I actually want to bring it down into this area just a little bit, and I'll bring this guy up. Another reason I like to use acrylics is because they're so vibrant. So you get these really, really nice rich colors. And so much so that I'm actually airbrushing over the marker right now. And it probably won't show up on camera, but I'm going to get a lot more pop out of the color by having some acrylic ink on top of the marker. Fun fact. So I'm going to go over this guy in the back just a little bit too, just to kind of bring that saturation up. And that's really it for this particular stage. Now I can switch over to working these large areas, kind of filling them in and cutting them out a little bit. But yeah, it's actually it for the airbrushing. Or at least until there's a reason for it to not be. I don't know.
Not be?
Yeah.
We like airbrushing.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things. It's a lot easier to do when there's not a camera right next to my face, because I can get much closer to the surface and be a little bit more deliberate. But in these demos, I like to try to keep things moving as quick as possible. I understand that attention spans are short and things need to explode every few seconds. And I'm saying that facetiously, but I'm the same way. Watching people's demos sometimes is incredibly boring, which is unfortunate. Yeah, so I just don't want it to be boring. Because people will come back through later and watch it, you know, tomorrow after it's over and it's posted, and that's fantastic. But we just don't want them to suffer either. Just cleaning out the airbrush, making sure that it's not, you know, super mad at me. Set that guy aside, and make sure my hands are clean before I start touching the paper again. You always want to make sure your hands are clean, because contaminating this stuff will, what's that?
Don't need any smears.
Yeah, contaminating the drawing will cause problems. So you want to be careful. I like to move fast, but sometimes that comes with, you know, knocking over a coffee mug or something really dumb like that. So, and just as well, at this stage, what I'll do, now that I basically have material everywhere from airbrush to acrylic to marker, I'll start to use a piece of paper to put my hand on rather than on the artwork itself. So what I have here is a white nylon eraser. The fact that it's white or nylon is not relative to the next thing that I'm doing, but what I'm going to do is use it, it's an eraser, I should have said that, to pull out some of the airbrushing that I did. And this is a classic illustration, like, traditional illustration technique known as subtractive highlighting. And I learned this many years ago. This is also part of why I like to be really light with the airbrushing. So, to try to explain this for somebody that doesn't do a ton of airbrushing, if you airbrush lightly, you end up with like a mist or dots, for example. Very tiny dots. And that essentially creates a little bit of grain. And that would seem like it would be aggravating, but you're actually giving the eraser something to pick up. So I'm like bringing in this harsh highlight here, which separates. I do have a little bit of overspray here, but this little edge highlight that I just did with the eraser separates that really nicely. And I can start to make these edges just a little bit hotter. Now, if I'd done a lot of the blending with marker, for example, I wouldn't be able to do this effectively, because underneath would essentially be stains of all the colors that I tried to blend with marker. So, there's that. Now there is, like with all things, there's a limit to what you can remove and what you can expect to get out of this part of the process. So, this is something to practice, experiment with, on something that isn't a final piece for somebody, somebody important. But subtractive highlighting is just, it's so cool. You can get so much more out of what airbrushing can do. You can also do the same technique with pastels, chalk pastels, because I believe that stuff is subtractive pretty continuously. It will depend on the paper that you're using for sure, but and it's also a softer material. So actually, I think with pastels you can subtract even more. But that can be good or bad, depending on how much you actually want.
Do you ever use Frisket or other masking fluid in your drawings? As creative guys?
Yeah, it's a good question. When I'm doing a really nice final piece for a company or somebody, I'll take a lot more time to mask these edges out and do something that looks a little bit more deliberate. I even have to use a different paper because not all papers are good for masking. I don't think I've ever used liquid masking on paper. Paper is very sensitive to masking as it is, so it already requires a lot of finesse and a very light touch so that you don't pull the paper up while you're working. And as far as Frisket, that again depends on the paper type. Marker papers are really delicate, so masking on them alone is already a big ask. It can be done, for sure, but it is a big ask. And I usually don't in these demos, because masking is horrendously boring to watch.
And time-consuming.
Yes, and just so time-consuming. I, at some point, will probably do a video about the masking technique that I like to use, because it is very cool and it is very effective. But and certainly not a go-to method for me. I actually like a little bit of a soft edge. I like this little bit of overspray that I've got going on here because it feels controlled and it doesn't look like I don't know what I'm doing. But everybody's experience level with the tools is very different. So what I'm doing, somebody else might not be capable of. What somebody else is doing, I might not be capable of. So that's part of why I like a variety of tools. Use a little bit of everything, use them for their strong points, and get the most out of them. Get some of these. Subtract a little bit of this red paint and a little bit of this blue from the wheels. A lot of the really harsh dynamics will happen as the final highlights are being done. And we have to leave some room for that as well. Each stage, especially in marker rendering of any type, is considering the paper color, the stages after, what's additive and what's subtractive. Markers essentially, like, they're die-based, so you're always building. And you don't have a whole lot of space to go backwards afterwards. So you have to be careful and know the limitations for sure.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. Yeah. But actually, we get some really good subtraction out of this one, which is awesome. Sometimes if subtraction isn't the subtractive erasing, rather, if it isn't coming out super clean, I'll have to come in with like a color pencil. And that works too. It just starts to take on another look, you know, something totally different, which isn't bad, but may not be what I'm after. So I'll take, while I've got the eraser here, maybe I'll do start to do the highlight in the glass. Because subtractive erasing is also a soft removal method, as opposed to like masking something out and shooting white paint and you'll get these super hard edges. This is a really organic looking type of highlight. And again, only possible if you're airbrushing certain paints and using them a certain way. So this combination of technique works really good, but if you skip any of these pieces and parts, your results may vary. So, and at this stage, of course, I'm using a brush to remove any dust and grime because I don't want to use my hand because it'll just contaminate my hand and then I'll end up putting it in something else. So with where we're at, I'm actually going to grab black marker again and I'm going to liberate this piece of paper very carefully. We'll go ahead and flip this guy over and I'm going to do some of the core color. You actually almost can't see any of the airbrushing on the back, but contrary to popular belief, you can actually make several passes with black marker and it will continually get deeper and darker. Eventually you'll run out of darkness and it'll just start to like pick itself up and redistribute itself, which is not helpful.
I don't know why, but that reminded me of Batman a little bit.
What did? Why?
I don't know, just because of the darkness.
The darkness.
Hiding in the darkness.
I see. So also I'm going to go back over some parts of the upper reflection area because now I've got some depth difference between the airbrushed areas and the marker areas. And some of this will be marker over top of the airbrushing and it might look a little bit glossier because it is. The ink is now sitting on top of everything else, which, as I alluded to with like a vellum or something like that, will give you a deeper look. It does, again, come with its own compromises. But it's like, do we want to pick up the airbrush again, mix up some more black, or what do we want to do? Hold on now, computer. You're going to be all right. No, I died. Alright, so with where we're at, I'm going to start to cut out the wheel ellipses, and I'm going to show you guys a great shortcut for that as well. Not real quick, I'm going to grab... So I know I got to tint this area here a little bit. All the ink around it is black, so all I got to do is take a gray value, and it'll just kind of pick up and smear a little bit of it there. I'm going to probably just try to simplify a very complicated explanation. So anyways, moving on. Next thing I'm going to do is cut out the wheels. So I'm going to use the exact same ellipses that I used for the sketch. Just because I sketched this earlier, I already know generally what they are, so I don't really have to guess any. And I'll grab a Sharpie. Not that Sharpie. That Sharpie's angry. This one's a little bit better.
I didn't know that one was angry.
Oh, you could just tell. It looked at me funny. And let's see, I'm going to need to go one size bigger than the last one that I used. And so these are obviously Ellipse Tools. And they are the quickest, fastest way to get the most accurate wheels. Now you can't just randomly pick an ellipse and put it somewhere. That does not work. They do have to be in the correct perspective for what you're drawing. And sometimes I'll freehand this part and just carefully run ink around. It actually, for me, depends on the paper. Because some of them are okay with that, and some of them are not. So, know your materials well, know what they can handle, what's appropriate for the technique, which is part of why I switched markers. I don't want to use the chart packs to run around wheels. As soon as you create a dent in the edge of the wheel, it's fixable with paint later, but we're trying to create a way to not make more work for ourselves. The Sharpie, just in general, it's alcohol based. It's a little bit more precise, I should say. I'm just gonna freehand come around these edges here. A lot of the edge detail will come back later with highlights. It's a black vehicle, so we are gonna lose some of the edges naturally. It's just the way it looks. And let's see. Actually, I want to have an underglow color. And I'm going to put it in ink first, and then I'll probably come back in with some colored pencil later. And for this particular underglow color, I'm going to go with purple. And this might seem like it makes no sense at all right at this stage, but it's okay. A lot of this stuff is just kind of prepping for the next stage. Again, if you consider that markers essentially are dye-based, you're always putting ground coats down for the next thing that you're going to do. You're building color constantly. And a lot of this is going to get buried, which is why it's not necessary to go all the way up the fender well with it.
It's slowly melting into the floor.
Melting!
It is so comfy.
It looks comfy. So I like, another color like this because it starts to add some dynamics to the artwork as well. I think I mentioned in the last video, if you just use the same colors for everything and keep everything super neutral, it gets pretty unexciting pretty darn quick. So make it fun. You're creating a type of artwork, so you want to keep your viewers interested. Do something fun. Pick some cool colors. Now you do need to be somewhat deliberate about the colors you choose so that they make sense. You don't want to just start going left field with colors, that's for sure.
I like the purple.
Such a cool color. It kind of rounds out something like this. And you'll notice I didn't take the black all the way down, although obviously I would just be burying all the ink that I just put in. I want a little bit of that underglow color, so I have to decide, how I'm gonna make these transitions work, so I can get a little bit of the tire read. And it might seem like I'm sort of guessing at this stage, and in some ways I am, but for me it's something that I've done a million times. I feel like I can guess fairly safely. Alright, so I'm gonna move these ellipses aside. And let's see, what markers do we have that are still functional? It's about time to go for another marker shopping trip here very soon. So I'm going to take a gray tone marker and start to pull these together. And again, the gray will pick up a little bit of the black and pull it down into the purple, and same the other way around as well. So, but we don't want to go too far in either direction. This will be a great time to flip over to the other side and help some of these blends happen that way as well. This marker's just a little bit dry.
Uh-oh.
That's alright, it's still working. Yeah. And we gotta be careful about how we do tire edges and stuff like that, because we can start to make tires look a little bit wonky. And there's an amount of that can be fixed you know, through the painting stage and the details later. But again, we don't want to give ourselves more stuff to do, more problems to solve. It's good to be able to think on your feet, for sure. I'm just kind of going back and forth with a little bit of that purple because it's going to do the same thing. It's also going to pick up some of the marker and redistribute it a little bit. And kind of want to make sure I've got my tire shapes, you know, looking uniform, so I don't have something that's too skinny on one end versus the other. But this is not generally something you want to fudge. You want to be very careful with tire shapes because it can get away from you really, really quick. And then you start to have something that looks a little bit unnatural. All this stuff is fixable, but you just have to be really, really aware of it while it's happening. Alright, so I'm going to flip it over and probably add a little bit of purple to the back side as well. You can see there's a bit of full saturation on this side, but it's just a teensy bit cloudy, so we'll get a little bit more saturation out of it by having both sides with that color. Now we might be able to do some of the transition work on this side as well. This particular paper is very interesting. It's coated on one side but not the other. So one side will hold ink differently than the other, but you'll still be able to see through both sides. Yeah, it's probably not super obvious, but yeah. That's alright. I know. Alright, so that looks really cool. Actually, the purple saturation definitely came up a little bit. And I might even grab an airbrush and just bring these blacks together a little bit better. It's a really quick thing at this stage compared to, you know, all the other stages of airbrush when I'm like, I don't know if there's too much or too little. And also at this stage, while I've got the space to flip this over, I start to do a couple of tests to see, you know, how deep I need to go on one side in order to get the look I'm after.
Well, it looks cool backwards too.
Yeah, it's funny. It actually almost looks more realistic on this side.
Yeah.
And and I always find that really frustrating when I flip something and I go, oh man, that's so much cooler. The reason that is because the side that I'm doing the final on has all the outlines. When the outlines tend to make things look a little cartoony, just in real life, nothing is actually outlined, so they can have a little bit of that look. So yeah, gosh darn stuff. But yeah, people don't know you're going to get a two-sided piece of art. It's awesome.
Yay!
Right, everybody wins. So these little core areas I'm doing, obviously with this particular number 5 gray, which won't show through a whole lot on the backside, but it will a little bit. So I'll start to get these little areas, and I can probably, there we go, tighten them up a little bit more, kind of pull them in. And this particular paper isn't as two-sided as other marker papers I use, but I noticed when I was using it for the other demo that I did, I actually had started on the wrong side, and I was like, well, that's cool. It's only cool when it's done on purpose, let's be real. So at this stage, I'll like go back and forth from one side to the other to balance things. The wheels and the cap, I don't want to go like full black with hard contrast lines, mostly because the vehicle is already black. You know, real chrome will get that deep, but if everything in this vehicle has these hard black lines swooshing from one side to the other, it gets really difficult to discern the surfaces. So that just kind of comes from experience, kind of going, you know, I need to dial back the look of this a little bit so that, you know, the paint can look correct. And because I have so many different paints and colors on and in inks on the surface, I the marker I'm using will pull up a little bit of everything, which is cool. Especially considering it's just, I think this is just a number 5, so it's not even a very dark marker. At least not compared to everything else that's on here. So, just kind of balancing everything, making sure I get the details the way that I want before I start to come in with some actual details. But I'm actually jamming along pretty good on this guy as far as time and the way it looks for the stage that it's at. Strangely, because I essentially skipped a step. And usually, it's one of the questions I get asked the most is about marker blending. And I really don't do very much blending with markers because to me it's not the ideal way to get to the end result I want, so I don't bother. But it is, of course, a question I get asked a lot. So I prefer to have some type of answer because I can certainly do it. It's just not my preferred method. So what I'm going to do is flip over the back, and where I have that little bit of window reflection, grab like a darker gray, like a number 8 or something. And I'll go ahead and I'll do that on the back side and be able to see it. This is probably high contrast enough to be able to see, maybe, from the other side. We'll see. We're about to find out. Yep, there we go. A little bit of that brim line came through. I could have done that on this side with a lighter marker. The reality is, once you start to mix this many materials, especially when you're laying so many markers, as you start to put more markers down, you start to subtract marker. So you start to get this really, it's called a modelly look. It starts to get really like speckly and dotty, and to me, pretty darn unattractive. So, being able to work both sides, say I use a much darker value on the back side, and it's going to be distorted by the opacity of the paper, means I could basically use both sides to create contrast and shape, which is awesome. Alright, let's see what we've got. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and darken that a little bit. And just kind of looking around and everything, making sure everything's balanced before I go on to the next step. I do want to airbrush a little bit of that black, but I want to, while I've got markers out, I just want to make sure I'm balancing everything appropriately. And creating some of these edges that I'm going to paint in with the highlights and whatnot. Let's see. Everything's looking good, really, so far. So far, so good. It's looking good on the monitor, too. Hell yeah. It doesn't always. Alright, so, let's see. I'm going to just mix a little bit of airbrush again. Yeah, I pre-mix everything, so it's already off on the side here, ready to go. So that if I do need to make an adjustment or something, I'm ready to go. Rather than
you're just so prepared.
Well, efficiency is a good thing to learn in artwork. If especially when you're using so many different materials together. And on a live video, like you guys don't want to see me running around looking for something. And I feel that way when I'm working too. I want to have all the materials that I need next to me, but also not every material that exists. I just want what I'm going to use. So I'm going to take a little bit of black and just barely, all I'm blending is the black into the gray. I don't want to get too carried away here. Just to make that a little bit softer. I could just continue to blend it with marker, but again, I've got the airbrush. All we gotta do is grab a little bit of paint, and we're good to go. And easy peasy, just like that. That stage is done. Of course, I've got black out, so I'm like, you know what? I really need a little bit of something here, or a little bit of something there. I've already got it out, I can just go ahead and do it. So let's see, is there anything? Well, maybe just the shadow where the wheel comes into the fender, just to create a little bit more depth there. Yes. But I want to be careful. I don't want to over muddy any of the warm tones either, because then I'll ruin all the really good color balance and color temperature I've got going on. If I overdo it at any stage, then I have to go back and rebalance everything else. So yeah, we're good right there. I could even go more saturated on the blue, but I'll set the airbrush aside for now. Let's see. Clear out the black, clean out the airbrush, and then we'll start in on some of this detail-y stuff. Because we've done all the subtraction already, all the airbrushing, all the marker. How are we doing on time here? What's up?
Sorry, funny picture.
Oh, okay. I said time and you laughed. I was like, what do you mean?
No, I'm not laughing at you, I
okay.
promise. I promise.
Thank you.
Now I'm laughing at you.
It's like if one of the Powerpuff Girls is screaming.
Oh, Bubbles? I can't do it. My voice can't go that high.
I won't do it on camera. It's inappropriate.
I am smart and strong.
Meanwhile, across the city. That was so perfect. Anyways.
Man, I haven't seen that show in a long time.
Yeah, it's a good one.
The City of Townsville.
Is that what it's called?
That's I think that's what. Yeah.
Nice.
They always start as the City of Townsville.
Uh-huh. As it would be.
Mm-hmm.
As it should be. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is get rid of as much of the junk that I've got out here as possible, because anything that I'm not going to use, I don't want to distract me for the next stage. So as I'm going to jump into pencil and these final highlights.
Okay.
Yes, yes. So I just want to make sure that, you know, this desk isn't that big, so I don't want to be knocking anything over while I'm working. So the very next thing I'm doing, I'm going to grab a couple of colored pencils. And today we're going to use a different brand than the other day, I'm pretty sure. So give me just a moment while I finish everything out here. I'm going to be using some Faber-Castells. And I don't want to leave too much work generally for a pencil, because I don't think pencil is overly attractive. But
Really? Really?
But for finish work, like some of these fine lines where the door jamb goes or something like that, it's more than ideal. It's really the right thing to use. You could do it with paint, and in the past I've done some of these details with paint, and they just end up being a little too harsh. So I can use, you know, if I've got a good range of colored pencils, I can fix any mistakes that I think need, you know, shape up some lines, because if the marker lines are starting to wander, pretty much the last thing you want to do is try to fix it with more marker, because you'll just end up chasing it, and it'll get away from you. It sure will. So using a tool like this is a little slower, a little bit more deliberate. When I'm first starting out a piece, I want things to move as quickly as possible and block out these areas as quick as possible. As I'm getting towards the end, I want to slow down and work these details more deliberately. So naturally I want to pick tools that do the same thing. Also, to me, pencil has a pretty grainy look to it, so I use it sparingly. You know, that's why I say just some of the fine lines, some of the detail stuff. I don't want to do blends or anything with a pencil. You can. It's just not the look that I'm after. While I'm here, I'm going to grab this eraser and pull out some of this overspray from the edges here. Again, you won't be able to remove everything, and you want to be careful not to like destroy the paper, but you can clean up parts of the edges, that's for sure.
Ellen, Lee, what?
Oh.
Say, great job, looks awesome. As always, thank you for your time, talent, and hospitality. Much appreciated. Have a great weekend. See you on the next one.
Hey, thanks for coming by. You have a great weekend.
Bye.
Stay safe. So I'm just cleaning up a little bit of overspray while I'm working some of the marker stuff. I usually make a decision like a little bit more towards the end if I'm going to do a background block or something like that. But I actually really like the way that this looks as a standalone. You know, I might do something a little trail off the edge here, but I actually like the way that this looks as a really nice clean rendering. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. But I did a pretty good job managing overspray on this one, so there's no reason to get too carried away. So it's going to clean up a little bit of this overspray. And some of these edges I'll be able to just pull back through with a little bit of white paint, which we'll get into here shortly. What's up?
So me with parents dealing with e-learning, and then another picture with teens, no kids, and it's like a smirky Leo DiCaprio.
No.
Yay, no kids!
That's funny. I'm thinking I need some more Faber-Castell pencils. I'm running low, or I'm being stingy with them. Yep, that's what it is. I got plenty. I'm just not using them. As expensive as they are, should really be using them. Alright, so now I've got the white pencil here. I can start to hit some of these edges. Now, at this stage, it's also really important not to be like, yes, let's outline everything, because that is also a mistake. And this is another stage where you could use fringe curves or ship's curves to get a bit more precise. But I'm a fairly competent freehand person, so this is a little bit faster for me because I don't have to worry about grabbing no tools. So I'm just going to go back and forth, black and white here, mostly because this is a black vehicle, so it doesn't require me to have the other colors that I have. If I needed to fix anything or otherwise, I could, but it's just, we're just doing highlighting edges here a little bit. Highlighting door edges is a big part of what creates depth and shape in vehicle renderings. Probably doesn't seem that obvious, but it's one of the few things that actually makes something look a little bit more real. Anyway, a little bit heavy on that outline. And dial it back really carefully with a little bit of eraser. And a lot of these highlights you could also do with paint in the end, and I am going to do some paint highlights. But there's a big difference between the paint highlights and the color pencil highlights. Aren't as bright, so the contrast is lower, so they more imply edges and shapes, versus the painted highlights they're going to be bigger and brighter and more deliberate. They just have a different purpose.
I think Lucy misses us.
Yeah. It's a doggo after all.
I hear her.
Well, we're getting through here. So just trying to get these window edges a little bit more legible. This is certainly a trick with darker color vehicle renderings, is you're going to lose some of these edges in the process, and rather than avoid them while I'm rendering, I just think it's a little bit faster to come back into the end and find the edges. Because if you just try to safely color in between all the lines all the time, it looks pretty rough. You know, a lot more line seams. Just doesn't look as good. And I'll plot in one of the highlights we've got going to have going on here. Just to kind of give a little bit of motion on the glass there. This is definitely more interesting to look at. And maybe we'll go a little bit harder on the windshield highlight so that it can come all the way up into the marker. So that it reads a little bit better. And of course we want to carry that highlight over the surface so that it looks like it's from the same planet of things happening. Very important. And the soft top that I've got going on here, I just want to highlight parts of the edges. Different materials have different gloss looks. So something that's a cloth like this, you don't want big, bright, harsh highlights. Even these color pencil ones are a bit exaggerated, but you also need to define the edges at the same time. So you don't want to not highlight them, but you want to be careful there, for sure. This is sort of my opportunity to come back and fix some of these back shapes. And let's see, we'll add a little bit of the edge to the fender shape here, because there's a seam where these panels come together. And again, you don't want to just outline these and make them super fat, because then they stand out too much. In the real car, they do sort of stand out, but you know, gotta be careful about your decision making. That's not to say that I always get it right. and treat the top edge just a little bit bigger. And then let's see the inside edge of the fender here so that we can kind of create a little bit of depth. We'll do the same. Come around this way. Because you are ultimately looking at the inside of the fender edge from this perspective. So it just gives you a little bit better sense of depth. Helps the vehicle rendering seem a little bit less flat. Alright, so we're doing good, doing good. Alright, so we just want to get a little bit of the edge here. You don't necessarily want to just outline every single edge, because then nothing stands out correctly. Then everything just is begging for your attention. So being careful, deliberate, not outlining everything just edge to edge, allowing some of these kind of softer transitions. Let's go ahead and block in the door hinges here. And let's see. Soften that up a little bit. So yeah, we don't want too many harsh highlights, especially not with pencil. We don't want to be gouging anything just yet. We want to save the big highlights for paint. Can only get the back side of this fender just a little bit. Maybe a little bit back here as well, just to start to balance the look of everything. And let's see. So clean up some of the marker edges here. Start to finish up some of these pencil details, and we can jump into the paintbrush highlights.
Yay! Who's excited?
Yeah.
So excited.
Is that because you know we're almost done then?
I didn't say that.
No, never.
I totally didn't say that.
Yeah, real quick while I'm in here, kind of highlight the edges of the rear view mirror a little bit real quick. I don't want to outline it and I don't want to over detail it, but I do want to imply that it's more than just a random shape that's in there. I took the time to draw it in, might as well do something with it. Are you still watching the feed?
Mm-hmm.
Is it got any lag in it, or does it still look okay?
Yeah, it still looks fine. Like there's some movement lag, but it's not, I don't think it's messing anything up.
Okay. Just curious. Some of the camera stuff is new, so we don't totally know always what's gonna work and what's not.
Granted, I do not have the sound on, so a good indicator for me is sound.
Yeah.
Rather than just watching the video feed.
That makes sense.
But I don't want to cause a disturbance in the sound, so.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
Alright, so right where I've got a little bit of that highlight, I'm going to come in with a little bit of pencil because I just want to bring it up a little bit more. Remember the edge for that hood seam. Let's see, what else? And let's see, got this little piece of trim in here. I could also do with paint, but I'm already here, and yeah, look at that, easy peasy. Kind of using the pencil to tighten up some of the marker. Sometimes the marker will bleed or feather a little bit more than I want, and that's okay. As long as we're anticipating the next steps, then it's all good. It'll be all right. Getting these highlights in here so that we can move on to the next stage. The highlights also tell a lot about the vehicle shape. Just like the marker portion should show a flow of how the vehicle is actually shaped. It is possible to do incorrectly. You wouldn't want to put straight line reflections on a shape that isn't straight. Otherwise it'll look very confused. I'm going to do a little bit of white highlight feathering in here. Just because I feel like it's going to help the look just a little bit there. And let's see what else. Maybe a teensy bit here. Just to bring it up a little bit. It's all a balancing act. But there will be a limit on what pencil can do. And that's when we jump into paint.
It's so shiny.
What's that?
It's so shiny.
So shiny. The best stuff hasn't even happened yet.
What?
I know, right?
What?
Yeah, the final highlights obviously are what really bring things up. As far as like the bling and whatnot. So let's see. Well, I've got the old white color pencil out. I'm going to highlight the purple in the tires just a little bit. But only where I think I'm going to do, you know, have it in line with the highlights that I'm doing as well, which is probably a video all on its own. How to highlight properly without being like, highlight, 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 you get a highlight. Because you see that happen sometimes in people's artwork. I'm like, oh my god, somebody discovered white paint for the first time.
It's amazing!
Is it though?
I don't know.
It sometimes is. So I'm also real quick going to put in a little bit of a tire edge here. I don't want too much because I don't want to waste time rendering something that isn't significant.
No, but next.
Just a teensy bit of tread here. Again, just to kind of split up that area. Sometimes if there's too much open area, like where the tire and the shadow comes together, it can be a little too hollow. Put a little bit of detail on that tire tread. Just something to kind of make it a little bit more interesting. Obviously, vehicles don't even have a purple underglow, but you know what we're doing here is for the sake of something that looks graphic and cool. You know, I prefer to think of stuff if it was going to be in a comic book or a cartoon. You know, I want to have a little bit more realism than that, but at the same time, I want it to be visually fun. I don't want somebody to look at it and be like, that's interesting. Which is part of why I don't find realism all that interesting. It doesn't really do too much for me. Alright.
Paul John just joined us. He says, I think I'm late for this live session. Just a little.
That's alright, we're still working.
He's asking if the sky is still red. Not near us.
There's a
You
little
go north though.
Yeah.
We're actually we're good where we're at. It just looks a little overcast here.
Yeah. Just kind of plotting in some of these final details before I break out the paint for the highlights. I'm just trying to decide if there's anything else I need to do within the wheels to kind of bring this contrast around just a teensy bit more. And thankfully I can kind of use pencil like I was airbrushing earlier, just kind of feather in and blend in some areas. But it's pencil, so it's way more precise and way more deliberate, which is good.
Which is it?
Yeah.
That's good.
As we're getting towards the end, we want the details to be placed on purpose and carefully. You don't want to be guessing with details. Especially at this stage, you know, we're like 85–90%, so we don't want anything to ruin the progress we've got. Just kind of tidying up some of this stuff real quick. Maybe thickening up a little bit of the edges, because the line weights also create a little bit of the depth of some of the seams as well. So in the case of these hubcaps, we need a little bit more on that side as far as line weight goes. And I had a little bit of that with the initial sketch, but you never know exactly if it's too much or not enough. At least until you get to that point. I'm just going to create a little bit of edge there for that dude. What's up?
I'm ready for bed.
Are you?
My eyes burn so much.
Dang. We're almost done. We just got to get through.
Computer stuff today. So much computer stuff today.
Still got to have dinner.
So many things.
all these different things. Alright, we are getting there, I promise. And a little bit of edge to the inside of the wheel here. Sorry, I know you want to move on, so I'll try to just pick up the pace a little bit here.
Roberto says you have one hell of a rendering. Congrats. Hats off, all that jazz.
Thank you, thank you. I'm just tapering some of these line weights just a little bit real quick before I switch over to paint. Again, kind of like any of the other stages, so that hopefully I can do this stage and be done with it and not really have to worry about coming back with pencil. I might, you never know. You know, sometimes a detail needs to be changed or adjusted or otherwise, but I think we're doing good here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that that the second camera view was especially helpful. Also, hey Paul John, what's up? It's cool seeing you in some of the in some of Lisa's live videos as well, and I appreciate you chiming in on some of the posts lately. Really appreciate it.
I keep looking for Lisa, but she's not here.
It's late here, so it's late everywhere else. It's later everywhere else, and she is in Texas.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so I think it's 2 or 3 hours between where she's at and where we are. And I assume she's a lot busier than I am.
Or she's relaxing.
Yeah, it is all possible. It is a Friday night after all. I think.
Yes, it is.
Nice.
Don't be so sad.
There, darling, oh no. So I've got these ellipse tools out. I'm going to come back in and clean up some of these areas that I rendered straight over. Just to kind of create the split up of the wheels, pieces, and parts. Again, something else I could also do with paint, but at this stage this is going to be a little bit faster. You want to like go check on them and make sure they're alright?
She's fine. It's only her that's whining. Ellie's like sleeping.
Oh really?
She's like laying flat in her channel.
Why are they like this?
Lucy's like, I know it's dinner time. Come on, guys.
I hear you. So sad. She probably knows we're talking about her.
She always does.
It's not gonna help.
She always knows.
She always knows.
She does the sad eyes. The spooky sad eyes.
That's what she does. Alright, the last thing that I'm going to do with pencil before I switch to not pencil is something else. Is grab another color to kind of go around this purple and yellow. While I like what I've got going on here, I just lately have enjoyed playing with another color to split those up. So I'm going to grab a Faber-Castell. This bright ass green sounds like a good idea. I'm just going to jump right into it. And for this I will grab one of the ship's cards because I don't want to really be doing any guessing at this stage. It probably isn't going to show up so much on camera, but me here I get to look at it and feel pretty cool about it.
Angel Delmar just joined. She's like, oh wow, this looks phenomenal.
Hey.
I have finally joined your live. I came from Lisa's stream.
Nice, I recognize the name.
I like that. Angel Delmar.
Hello. This green is definitely giving a whole lot extra glow, which is super, super cool. And I'll probably grab a little bit of purple to, oh yeah, that's super cool. Whole lot of extra zing there. And yeah, real quick, I'm going to shape up this tire area. The way reflections happen on tires is really, really unusual because it takes a few things into account that make the shape of the tire. And it might seem counterintuitive, but the shape of tire is not the shape of the wheel. They're actually different things. So, where I'm at, what was I just doing? I was doing a thing. So yeah, I got a really cool glow from the bottom. Let me see if I've got a purple that I can use to bring up the center of this purple just a little bit more. There we go. And then that give me a little bit of pop as well. At the end of the day, we're trying to draw something really, really cool. You know, say for example, a lot of what I do is post it on social media. So the reality is, we're competing for attention with everybody. So how you do your artwork has a lot to do with how you grab people's attention. Yeah, it definitely looks really, really cool. Glad I decided to grab some extra purple in that. Just a little bit of extra zing. It certainly does take it out of the realm of, let's say, realism for sure. But I mean, when we're making artwork, do we just want to reproduce a photo? Maybe sometimes. It depends on what you're after. But in the case of what I do, that's really not my intention. I want to provide the viewer or somebody who's commissioning me with something different than what could be in a photo. I mean, granted, as some of you guys are watching me, you watch some of Lisa's live streams, and what she does is she takes, or what she seems to do rather, is take elements, several different elements, and put them together in, you could say, a photo. She's really creating a composition, and then painting it her own way, so that in no way is the same to me. That's actually a really, really smart way to do it.
Angel's saying, Chris Dunlop, since Halloween is upon us, would you make a Halloween-themed vehicle?
I certainly could.
Supernatural.
Yeah, you know, that's a good idea. Or sometimes I do a version of Christine.
Oh yeah. I keep forgetting.
Yeah, it's one of my all-time favorites.
We watched it last Halloween.
It's tradition.
Every night we watch a Halloween movie. Every night. Probably won't be this year, but that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm going to take a little bit of this purple and just kind of hit some of these edges real quick because I want a little bit of that color bounce to play into what I'm doing. Because again, it just kind of is going to give all of this stuff a slightly more well-rounded look in what sometimes is referred to as color play.
Paul John wants to know what Strathmore paper you're using and do you recommend Copic markers?
That's a really, really great question. So the paper I'm using, actually I'll grab the pad since I tore this paper out directly out of the pad. What I'm specifically using today is 100S Smooth Comp from Borden Riley. This is a really unusual paper. Like, not likely to find it in your local art store unless it's like an indie type of art store. It's very unusual. And I'm really more using it for demo purposes. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like a go-to or my preferred paper or anything like that. I use a bunch of different papers. But that's what I'm working with today. I'm liking it so far. You know, there's good things and not as good things for sure, but that's true of everything. As far as Copic markers, was the question, what was the question related to Copic markers, Miss Lady? What was the question related to the Copic markers?
Do you recommend them?
Ah, that's a good question.
Concerning about light fastness.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's a really interesting question. I'm not really an expert on the capabilities of Copics, but it's also not a marker I often use. So Copics are an example of alcohol-based markers. I tend to not use alcohol-based markers. What I prefer, or my go-tos rather, I have a bunch of different markers, but my preference is these AD chart pack markers, and they are xylene-based, which is its own animal. And one of the reasons I prefer to not use alcohol markers is because I like to sketch in Bic pen, and so my foundation sketch, if I use alcohol markers, it's possible to smear some of the marker, or some of the Bic pen rather, because the chemical, the main chemical is similar, so they can reverse each other. So I don't use Copics a lot. I also don't find them to be very rewarding for the cost. But my understanding is that they do have a better light fast rating than most markers because of the way that they work. as far as pigment versus dye. But again, I'm not an expert on the on the Copics. I'll use them in a pinch. If I don't have a, like in some weird color that I need. But at that point, if there's some weird color and I can't find a marker for it, I just airbrush it anyways. I don't worry so much about if that perfect marker color exists. Not super important. It's not to me. So I'm still kind of noodling a little bit with a color pencil. I don't mean to be.
All good.
But I think we're at a good spot for them highlights. As soon as I do this. Shush.
It's like, you mean we weren't doing them already?
I know. No. No, I gotta grab some paint to do that. So, no, I was not. And for anybody who's joining, I do have my lovely wife here. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. She'll just read them off the screen for me, and so I can keep jamming. If you guys have any questions at all, I'm happy to answer anything.
Just looking, and I'm over here.
So many things.
Stretching my back.
Do what?
I'm stretching my back.
Alright, so I'm going to move these color. We're going to remove these color pencils. Sorry, I just got a notification on the screen there. And grab some paint for highlights. I'm going to set these guys aside. And sandpaper over. And the highlights is like the least amount of material I need to do anything. But if I need to rotate the page, you know, I want to have like, move this guy down. Just tack it down with a couple quick pieces of tape, so that if I need to rotate the paper while I'm doing highlights, I don't have to flip the paper around or anything silly like that. Yes. Yeah, we're looking good. Got really, really deep, a lot of contrast, but it's about to heave even more. This is another fun product that I'll show you guys that I just started using. I generally use acrylic wash for highlights anyways. I just bought a tube of Liquitexes for the first time to try. And it comes in this really fancy squeezy tube. Easy peasy. Acrylic wash is freaking amazing. I usually use a different brand, but in spite of that in the store, and I like to try things when they come out on the market anyways, because if there's a chance I can improve what I'm doing, I certainly want to. So, grab everything and give it a try. So I'm just grabbing a little bit of water here, because acrylic wash and acrylic in general, they're water-based, so that's all we need in order to start creating these highlights. I grab one of my mini painty brushes, one for feathering and one for painting. Right, let's see, where are we at?
Drop stuff?
Say again?
Did you just drop stuff?
No, why?
Oh, it just sounded like it from where I was.
I don't know what that sound was.
Oh.
That was you.
No, not me.
Sounded like something taking a picture.
I found some funny stuff.
It's your screenshot.
Yeah.
And you're worried about me.
I am. I'm looking at both.
You're looking at what?
I am looking at both.
Doing fine.
I'm an expert at it now with Zoom.
Nice.
I have to like have two screens side by side on the same screen. It's awesome.
Practice makes perfect. I'm going to start by getting some of these outside edges. And at this point the contrast may or may not show up on screen, but that's okay. There's another stage that of course has to be done fairly delicately. I'm going to try to move through it quickly. But delicately because, you know, most papers are very thin. So we can't just pile on a bunch of paint and hope that it's going to be okay. Although that's sort of the goal at this stage. You could try to leave as much of the paper white as possible, and that works for a lot of transition areas. But as far as highlights go, especially in the case of vehicle, these are glossy paint jobs. We need the highest level of contrast possible. So these painted highlights are really the way to go. They'll give you the brightest whites. But of course, they also have to be put in the right areas too. You don't want to just start blobbing down highlights, because then it'll just look like a car that was parked in the field with fireworks going off. And that's cool, if that's what you're after, for sure. Not what we're after here today. No, no, no. I'm going to be a little bit more deliberate. I'm going to highlight edges, but in a way that emphasizes the shape and flow of the car. And we don't want to just highlight everything, because then it starts to look like a mess too.
Angel said, Chris Dunlop, I attempted to draw Volkswagen, but it looked bad. What color pencils do you use?
I'm sure it didn't come out that bad, really. I mean, many drawings take more than one attempt to get right. I think this one I had a couple of tries at it before I was able to balance things the way that I wanted. As far as color pencils, I use them for the detail work. Like if you were to watch back through the earlier part of this, what I generally go back and forth between is Derwent, I believe they're polychromos, and Prismacolors. And it sort of depends on the paper. It sort of depends on how much time I have. So, not exactly one answer. But I like them both. Sometimes it'll just come down to, the color that I need. You're right over there?
I'm dying.
Miss Kelly is dying.
I'm dying right now.
I'm try to get the side trim here. You could conceivably tape this out and paint it. This is really not my favorite method to do this type of stuff. Too slow. Of course, freehanding is a bit of a gamble too. Just kind of hoping you're going to make it to the other side cleanly. I did okay. You'll be alright.
You did good.
What's that? What are you doing over
I
there?
can't share on camera. It's funny though.
I believe you.
All you need to know.
Alright. I'll save that for later. Alright, so I'm going to paint in a little door handle here. Oftentimes doesn't really take much. I mean, solid white against black is going to look like a pretty shiny piece of trim. And while we're here, we'll go ahead and get the mirror edges in. And let's see what else is next. Just got to keep hitting some of these edges until we have a good balanced flow of details. So let's see here.
Do you use AutoCAD for precise measurements? Angel is wondering.
I do not. I actually don't have any CAD programs or any CAD software. I tend not to worry so much about that level of precision, especially with concept stuff. But if I'm working with a builder that does need something a bit more accurate, at that point I might fly to the shop so that we can work together in person, figure out what it is they're totally after, and make some real measurements from there. So no, I don't have any CAD stuff. I realize stuff like that is kind of wave of the future, but it also can negate a big part of the art process too. At a certain point, too much precision can kill creativity.
No. Don't kill it.
Don't do it. Just trying to get some of these edges. Like, I don't want to outline everything, but I do want to show some of these edges a little bit more. There we go. That's a pretty good balance there. It's a new paint for the highlights that I'm using. Is a new paint for me, so I'm still getting used to how it flows and how it works with the brush. So excuse me if I'm doing a little bit of trial and error here. Otherwise, we're looking good.
Will you feed me soon?
Of course.
Yay.
You know, I also want food. I too am hungry. Plus, working on the highlights, so you know we're almost done. Yay!
Yay.
I'll highlight the door hinges here. And the top of this fender edge. Just kind of follow my guide that I did with color pencil. Feather the edge a little bit with a wet paintbrush. There we go. And maybe connect these two a little bit better. And don't necessarily just want to create a bunch of outlines around everything, because that'll start to take on a bad look as well. Let's kind of go back and forth with a little bit of this acrylic wash and a wet paintbrush. Kind of soften the edges a little bit. And this is definitely the stage to slow down a little bit and be a little bit more precise. I'm still trying to jam through it, but still, this would be a good time to be slowing down for sure. Maybe down the road we could do one of these as like a follow along type of thing.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, maybe I'll just create an outline that everybody can use, and we can all kind of go through the process together. I guess I would assume that everybody has materials. That's where it gets tricky. This is the really quiet stage.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the stage that requires a lot more attention. So I don't mind talking while I'm working, but I don't get sidetracked either.
I was gonna say concentration, but
Yeah, concentration for sure. Because if I make mistakes at this stage, it's fine. Everything is certainly fixable, but it just takes more time. So getting a little bit of this headlight detail in here. A lot of the stuff that I airbrushed over or markered over, I just do it out of habit because it won't matter. I'm gonna come back and then paint some of the details and highlights anyways. So there's certain things that it doesn't matter that I painted over early on, or yeah, markered or painted over, because they're just going to get detailed over in the end here. Kind of create this nice highlight around the edge here.
Angel said they're binging your past videos. It's a breath of fresh air because it's drawing cars, which is totally new to me.
Oh wow, right on. Well, thank you.
Yay!
Hopefully there's some useful information in there.
I'm sure there is.
Yeah. Oh well, hopefully there's a thing. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of YouTubers on. There's a lot of video people here on the YouTube that also do car design and stuff like that. So So some of you watching my videos, I feel very special. Thank you. I'm just gonna come through and hit some of these real quick. Just to kind of add a little bit of punch to the detail. And like I said, I'm just kind of finding some of these small edges that I want to highlight in detail. I don't want to just go around and hit everything, because then I'm like over outlining, and we're just about there with the edges, and then I can do these. Do the main highlights, and we can just move on with our lives. Just a few more long lines, and then of course I gotta detail the wheels a little bit, but I'll probably save that for last. Again, just kind of going back and forth a little bit of this white paint and the water in the paintbrush here. So I can softly feather out these edges while they're still wet. It just kind of creates a nice motion with the look. Painting highlights is like one of those things you could spend forever on, but certainly not my goal here right now. I want to end up with something that's good and feels complete, but I don't want to spend all night on it, that's for sure. And oftentimes these demo pieces, I'm not totally sure ever exactly how they're going to go. As far as, I might bomb through something really fast if I'm like, well, this is looking awful. And I'll just be like, fuck it, let's just get through it. But this is going really good, actually.
Paul John said, I totally agree. I've been following the same human figure drawings and paintings, and Chris's content might be one of the first here on YouTube.
Oh, wow.
Really?
That's really interesting. I feel like there's a lot of other automotive artists here.
I don't think so.
I mean, I guess maybe I follow the other two. I don't really know. But I feel like there's a lot, so it does seem like a strangely, I don't want to say competitive area, but I'm certainly one of the smaller ones by a long shot. There's some huge names that are automotive design artists that have YouTube channels. But I like to think what I'm doing is a little bit different than everybody else. I could be wrong, but I have a bit more of a Chip Foose, Steve Stanford technique. Super traditional, and also filmed in real time. I see a lot of artists that share videos that are misleading about how long it actually takes. And I actually work really fast, but fast is also sort of relative, So when we're probably 2 and something into this one, we are just a little over 2 hours. So that's about average for me, really. As far as one of these demos goes. I'm not totally done, but we're so close. So, yeah, I do feel like sometimes I'm seeing artist videos of them doing stuff. It's a little bit misleading about how long it actually takes to do. So, carefully feathering these details. Now is the time where it gets all Bob Rossy. Like, we're just going to put a happy little highlight right over here. Careful.
A happy little tree or a silky little cloud up here.
Exactly.
Put a little afro on Chris.
Yeah, this is certainly the time to be careful, so I want to make sure I'm being deliberate in steps. Highlight the back edge of these fenders just a little bit. Just trying to get some of these details to stand out a little bit more. But being careful about when to dial it back as well. Believe it or not, you can over detail something.
Creative Goddess says, I haven't seen any other auto artists either. This is actually fast for how much work you are doing. I completely agree.
I certainly appreciate that. I do tend to move pretty quickly through artwork. It is my job to do, and it's very much expected of me. And I'm glad to be able to work fast. And I do legitimately know of other automotive artists that are here on YouTube. If anybody's curious, I'm happy to share them, or I could just squander all the attention. But it's not like my channel's huge or anything. The other artists that I think of are freaking massive. My channel's like new compared to everybody else.
We've just started putting more content on, and we're not exactly new.
Yeah, that's fair. Actually, when I was looking at analytics from YouTube overall, I think last year or the year before, I didn't post any videos at all. Yeah.
That sounds right.
But doing videos is a lot of work. Learning the video-y stuff, I know it probably doesn't seem like it's a lot of work, but we used to do a lot more like live videos on Instagram, and I still do plenty, but it's a different thing to do it this way. All right, so switch over to some of these wheel details. Start to get wrapped up here.
You said that an hour ago.
I know. I keep saying it. I probably did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Sad
But I still love you.
I appreciate it. I love you too. Just cleaning up some of these wheel details here. Wheel details aren't something you really want to fudge. There's a lot that can go on in the body that you can move around and make some mistakes, and it's not so bad, but wheels still need to be round at the end of the day. Very, very important. What's that?
Creative Guy says you should squander all the attention. She's funny.
That's funny.
Do it.
There's a lot of cool artists here, though. I certainly enjoy Lisa LaCrie's videos. Probably some of the most fun stuff that I like to watch. Because it's really informative, even though we actually have totally different approaches on so much stuff. But that's kind of what I like about it. About watching her ideas about stuff. It's just because it's so different than what I do. I already know how to do what I do, so there's no point in me watching somebody else do something I already do.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. Alright. Adjust the brush a little bit so I can get these painted details a little bit finer for this last little bits of stuff on the wheels. Because you can one brush and you can just adjust how you load the brush to get certain types of lines or details. And something like acrylic or acrylic gouache, you can change the flow and the shape of the highlights just on how much water you use versus how much paint you use. But edge highlights on shiny surfaces is very, very important to give a good legibility. And freehanding them is like always oh man, I hope we get it. But I tend to do okay. Like I said, I try to move quick, but What's up?
Just reading.
Oh.
Paul John says, for general public, though, the one who is new to art, general results here on YouTube is about human figures and animals. The odd one of art is new to me.
The odd one in art is what?
Automotive art is new to him.
That makes sense. I think some of the more popular stuff that I watch on YouTube is definitely more grounded in traditional artwork and technique. And honestly, there's a lot more value there, I think. A lot more people are probably interested in learning to paint than to draw and render cars. This type of stuff to me feels very antiquated. In kind of a cool way. It's kind of cool to do stuff like this traditionally, because it's when you have computer technology to use, why would you even bother to learn doing it this way? But that's sort of what makes it cool at the same time. It's differenty. But yeah, certainly YouTube is the place I go and I'm like, all right, how to something related to paint. Honestly, it's interesting you mention that. and kind of gets me onto a rant about a topic. Anytime that I am looking for rendering information on YouTube, I quickly find myself frustrated because there isn't very much. There's some good stuff, but a lot of it's either stuff I already know or is stuff that people are saying is fact and it's wrong. So neither one of those are very helpful. But, you know, I kind of struggle with the idea of doing some of this stuff with more depth because, like I said, I feel like a lot of this stuff is pretty antiquated. You know, is there enough people that want to learn how to use markers or care about marker papers or any of the silly stuff that I do? Like, does it matter? It's certainly interesting, so hopefully it's at least entertaining to watch. I realize this particular video is about as long as any of the other ones I've done, unfortunately. I was expecting to move through this one a little bit faster, but I actually think I was expecting this to come out worse.
Really?
Yeah, well, maybe worse is the wrong word to use. I was expecting to do a quicker version of it, which will be a little bit more loose. You know, it leaves a lot more details open, which in its own way is fun, but that's not what happened. I ended up kind of like settling in, and here we are. And here we are, my poor wife.
12 hours later.
I
no
died.
Food.
No food.
Just laying on the floor.
Hey. Well, in case anyone's curious, my wife is dying.
I just melded with the floor.
I'm hungry too, you know.
I'm telling. But you're keeping stuff going.
Yeah, well, I'm an overachiever, so I have to finish. At this point, it would be silly to be like, all right, well, that's where I'm going to stop. So close. Also, these videos are a lot more fun with you in them anyways, Katie.
Oh, I know.
Oh, I know. Well, hang on now. Let's take it down a notch. Try to get some residuals and some royalties and whatnot.
Yeah, where my money?
Oh, my money.
Where my money? I'm kidding. Sort of.
Sort of. Listen, I'm going to pay you with the best Taco Bell that this land has to offer. Actually, I don't know what we're having.
What to say? We decided on Taco Bell?
We have not decided on Taco Bell. We have decided on whatever's open at whatever time this is done. If it's late for us, I imagine it's much later for everybody else. I wouldn't normally do a video this late, but I knew that I wasn't going to do a vlog this week, and I wanted to have something. So yeah, that's why this is happening. And watching some of Lisa's videos, I noticed she ends up doing them more in the evening, and I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder if there is more people around at nighttime. Granted, she has a massive audience, so it's hardly apples to apples. So yeah, there's definitely a part of me that was just like, oh, I wonder if more people will be around in the evening versus during the day, because I have a habit of doing these like, you know, early in the evening or something like that. You know, when my wife's actually getting home from work.
I see your face.
What?
I see your face in the camera.
I'll get out of the. I'll try to get out of the shot then. But in some ways, actually, I think this time of day works a little bit better.
Even though I'm delirious.
Yeah, it's okay. We're all a little delirious.
Melting. I am melting.
Melting!
Yay!
And now that we're almost done, we are actually almost done. I'm gonna keep saying these empty promises just to haunt you. No. Hey, you just browse that Taco Bell menu. You just start daydreaming. But
That does not help.
4K. All right.
No.
We are so close. It's crazy how close we are. What's up?
Creative guy said, sounds like it might be Chipotle tonight since they're open till 10.
Oh, shit.
I thought ours closed at 9.
We live in a really sleepy town.
No, I don't know. Hours have been changing lately, so I don't know.
That is a fair point. Things are different now. We can't just assume everything was like the before time.
In the way before time, when people could go to work and come home and not have to worry about BS. So
and,
awesome.
and dying all the time.
And dying.
Nobody wants to
Everything dying.
be 0 deaths. Alright. Guess what? We're almost done.
No, stop saying that.
Why?
Just say don't.
Because no.
Paul John said, I can see this type of art sells more because it's new to the community than the been done. I think you know, been there, done that.
That's very interesting. Well,
I don't know.
time will tell, I guess. I'm happy to be doing more videos now than I was. Obviously, I was really not doing them for a long time. But I think this month I've already put out more videos, or in the last month, than the last 2 or 3 years combined. Just trying to take things a little bit more seriously. But fingers crossed that, yeah, hopefully there's a lot of people here that want to see more of this. Whether people want to learn or they're just entertained by it, man, I'll take whatever it is. Well, certainly, you know, we don't even have enough we don't have enough views or anything like that right now to even be a monetized channel. So this is all like, at the moment, very much just for fun. This is what I actually do for a living. But as far as like, this isn't something that has any financial gain from the YouTube standpoint right at the moment.
Not yet.
Not yet, yeah. We're just kind
Yeah.
of getting the groundwork going.
I totally hit my elbow.
You alright?
I'm going. You just made a funny sound. Ow, it's hollow.
I died.
No, I don't want to die.
No, don't do the dying. Oh God, we're almost done.
Stop saying that.
The curse. Alright, guess how almost done we are, guys. We are so almost done.
I'm gonna kick the table.
No. You're gonna cause problems that are gonna take longer to fix.
No.
How not done do you want me to be? I'm confused.
No, I want you to be frustrated. Be like, well, I'm done.
Well, F it. We are done now.
Throw this table.
I'm gonna throw this table. Was this a wrestling match?
Yeah.
Okay.
It can be. I don't know.
No. Why?
Creative guys, you can think about Patreon.
That's a good point. And again, kind of riffing off of some of my artist friends, seeing that there does seem to be a little bit of potential in that. Like I said, this is doing concept artwork is already what I do for a living, which is awesome. I do really enjoy it. But I guess for something like Patreon, I guess I would wonder if there's enough people that are interested in learning this type of thing. Yeah. That is the question, but that's the question for all things. So
I
now,
think so.
yeah, so now we're blobbing in the final highlights. And these are the nice, big, fat, shiny guys. It kind of gives us these hot spots. I see sometimes other artists, when they're watching videos, they'll do some of this stuff a little bit too early, and it's sort of confusing.
No.
What's that?
Screen went blank on me. Don't do that. Bad tablet.
And you're watching the feed on the tablet?
Something happened.
Give me some lag.
Is it still running on your computer?
It is.
Why, computer?
Let me see if we're still running OBS. Yes. Yep, still did.
No. Do your thing.
Yeah, it's probably just a little bit of lag. Just catching up. I keep flopping in these highlights and hopefully the feed resumes.
It's not working.
It would be such a shame to get all the way to the end. It would be hilarious, really. Greatest prank of all time.
I didn't do it, I swear.
You come back, or no?
No.
Huh.
It's just the title screen.
Interesting. Yeah, it must be a little bit lag. It's still rolling on my end, but yeah, it must be some lag there. Fall short.
No, don't do that. No. Darn it.
What's happening?
It did a thing.
Just kind of putting in some of these final blings.
Okay, we're fine. We're good.
These are really like the hot spots that kind of give some of the glossiness. In order for something to read glossy, it needs to have really high contrast. That's much more achievable with these darker colored vehicles.
Creative guy said, "Where are the keys?" Oh wait, that's an illustration of a car.
Where are they?
Yo.
These are the questions I would like answers to as well. I've got, I was going to say I've got a 69 Volkswagen Bug, which is what this is. It does not look anything like this. Mine is a lot modified. It's mostly modified, actually. Not as recognizable as a Volkswagen Bug.
Angel wants to know what, hang on, Mr. Dunlop, so do you have like a weekly schedule for live streams or pre-recorded video content? Because I am loving this.
Nice. Well, thank you. I don't, at the moment, I want to be doing this a little bit more strategically and a little bit more on purpose. We used to be doing the Instagram videos a lot more regularly, but we stopped doing that and kind of switched over to YouTube. I actually like this format better. It feels a lot less rushed. Which I don't know if that's good or bad, but also we're shooting in the correct aspect ratio, which is nice. But you know, that's a really good suggestion to kind of come up with a schedule, because I realize a lot of people plan to watch this type of stuff, and anytime that I've been announcing the next live video or something like that, it's been like the same day or the day before or something like that, compared to some of the other artists that I follow who give people like days notice, or they do something that is a little bit more regularly scheduled, and I think that's great. So I think that's a really good idea. So thank you for the suggestion.
A lot of the YouTube stuff we watch, they have a regular schedule.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, a lot of the YouTube stuff that we watch is dailies. Like, that's just people's lives.
That's too crazy for me.
Yeah, and again, we're not. This isn't a monetize. We don't qualify for monetization or anything like that at the moment. So, you know, I have to make sure that I'm getting regular work done while all this stuff is while we're working on video stuff as well, because I really, really enjoy the video content, and I love doing these live videos as well. I don't know if Katie enjoys them as much, but
I do. I'm just dying.
that's okay. Believe me, I am hungry as well. I just like, oh, we're so close.
It's been a long day.
It has. That's the other kind of the tricky side is we both have a full day, and then
and then we do this.
And then we come in for the entertainment. That's what we do. But yeah, that's a great suggestion. I'll think on that over the weekend so that I can start to create a bit more strategy around this. It'll be good for me as well to not be just willy-nilly doing these. Because obviously it's better if we get more viewers. It's good for everybody. We get more questions, we get a little more feedback.
Which, if we had a day or two that are regularly scheduled, people can plan around it more and actually watch it.
That is true.
Creative Goddess, you could be an instructor on Domestika or Skillshare as well.
That's an interesting idea.
I keep forgetting about Skillshare.
Yeah, I do too. We always the other YouTubers that we watch always seem to be sponsored by Skillshare or something. And it looks cool.
I'm not familiar with Domestika.
I'm not either. I always wonder also about my qualification level for instructing.
And I say you're silly.
Yeah, I know how to do what I do. I don't know if it's necessarily correct.
Who cares?
I don't know. Somebody that wants to know the right way. I'm just doing it a way.
Right, but it's art. It's not. I don't think there's one way for art.
Are you kidding? There's only one way for art.
Nope.
One of us.
No.
No. Alright, so now we're just down to the wheel highlights, signature, and Taco Bell. Here we go. Actually don't know what we're having, so I should stop saying Taco Bell.
You keep saying Taco Bell.
Otherwise I'm gonna make it our reality. I'm gonna will it into existence.
It's so messy.
You know, we should just send Lucy to go get some Taco Bell.
She's taking your car then, not mine.
No.
No, just her in my car.
For anybody
She
curious,
doesn't have thumbs.
Lucy is our dog. Probably not a good idea that she drive any car.
She don't have thumbs.
She would do it though, because she's just so helpful. She wants to help.
But she doesn't have money. She hasn't gotten any monies from her dog job.
Yeah. And they really cut her hours back from the dog factory.
Well, that's what happens with COVID, man.
I know, right? It's hitting everybody,
Mm-hmm.
even the dogs.
She told me she can't pay her rent this month.
It's not good.
Yep.
You're not good.
Sorry if I butcher your name. It's like Soamil. I am so sorry. Said thank you for making great videos.
Thank you so much for checking them out.
Angel said, in time though, I will proudly say that I was one of the earlier supporters of this channel. Oh yeah.
Well, that is awesome, and thank you so much. By the way, what kind of artwork do you do?
Now my nose is dry. But yes, other artists, tell us what you do.
Yeah, I'm always really curious what everybody else does. Well, I'm painting in these wheel highlights, which are the final highlights on this particular vehicle I have for runs.
Did you just say wheel highlights?
I don't know.
What did you say?
Wheel highlights?
I thought you said whittle.
Wheel highlights. I don't know if Taco Bell is going to save you.
I'm melting into the floor.
Not sure if it's a good idea for you to even participate.
I'm gonna get kicked out.
Making us look bad. People won't take me seriously. That's fine. People won't take me seriously anyways. That's the joke.
Life is a joke.
You're supposed to say I was... I butchered that joke.
Wait, what?
I was going to say something that Zoidberg said, but I'm realizing that I am also tired. The only thing that's keeping me awake is that I had coffee before we got started.
I actually had an energy drink before I got home, and that didn't do shit.
Well, we have been hanging out for a couple hours. So...
2.5 hours.
Just like any of the other live feeds.
Ugh.
Except I wasn't expecting it to be this long. That part is true. I was actually expecting to zip through this. Literally, one of the earlier questions was about the color, and this is, to me, one of the faster colors to render, but everything always comes down to details. You could spend forever on details, and then you've spent forever on details. You could take something really, really fast and turn it into something that took however long this took.
The creative goddess said, "This was fun, and your work is truly beautiful and fantastic.
Thank you very much.
I've been watching my boyfriend, and we are both amazed by how beautiful this has become."
That's really awesome. Thank you.
You guys are so nice.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. You guys watching on a phone or a tablet, or
TV?
you guys just huddled around candlelight? That's what I'd be doing.
So that's where my candles went.
They were so delicious. They tasted just like they were labeled.
Yay!
Yay!
That was what it was supposed to do. I was thinking of something else to say. No,
It didn't happen.
it didn't.
So plus.
So Emil said, "I'm also a transportation designer.
Oh, nice.
This is amazing to look at these in-depth illustrations."
Man, that's awesome. I don't know too many other automotive illustrators. I mean, I know people superficially on like social media or whatever, but rarely does another one chime in on a video or anything like that. So that's super cool.
Angel says they do mostly portraits and occasionally streetscapes with impressionistic stuff like
wow.
Van Gogh.
Oh wow, that's super cool.
I like that stuff. It's pretty. I'll look that up later.
Yeah. You should send me some artwork. If we follow each other on Instagram, you should send me some photos of your artwork.
That'd be so cool. Creative Goddess says they are watching on a 27-inch iMac. Whoop whoop.
Oh, cool. Nice. Hopefully there's enough definition in this video. This is all like lag, buffer, lag, buffer.
No.
Yeah, every time I hear the computer, that's all I think about. Is there a helicopter taking off, or are we buffering? We're probably buffering.
No, we'd have to have a fan in here actually going with it to make that noise.
Yeah.
We can make our own helicopter noises.
We can make our own helicopter. Brought to you by Taco Bell.
Stop saying Taco Bell.
It's almost Taco Bell.
Because now I'm going to be sad if we don't get Taco Bell.
What?
Because now I'm going to be sad if we don't go get Taco Bell.
Well, the good news is we know that they're open, for sure.
For sure.
Or, you know what? What time is it? Let me
9:30.
not speak out of turn here.
It's pretty much 9:30.
It's pretty much 9:30. Hell yeah. I mean, oh.
Oh.
Done.
Sad face.
Anybody curious about actual commentary of the thing I'm drawing right now that isn't Taco Bell? But depending on how long you're watching, obviously the entire illustration with the marker and the airbrush, things loosen up pretty quickly. But these painted details are what really bring things back together towards the end. And if you were just like super precise and wanted to be really careful through the whole process, you could keep it this tight the whole way through. I just find that to be incredibly time consuming, and the more time consuming it is, the less like you want to do it. It's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to have fun or die trying. Just making a second pass on some of these big highlights. Oftentimes a single pass is pretty good, but you'll get a little bit more out of it on the second pass. Really bring the contrast up. What happened?
I don't know.
Things have happened.
Angel says, off topic, but how is your city doing now? Can you go out grocery shopping, or is it still tight lockdown?
We've been pretty open for a while. Granted, going to the grocery store is still a little bit weird, because everybody's wearing masks, which is, of course, I think pretty appropriate, but you can't look at people in the eyes, and I mean, I guess you can see their eyes. I don't know, it's weird, because it feels like people act like they can't see, but masks don't really cover your eyes. I don't know, it's weird. But yeah, things are, I don't want to say totally back to normal, but it's less tense than it was, that's for sure.
As the family I work for put it, it's like we have been taken off the naughty list
Yeah.
by Mr. Newsom. So that makes me happy. As long as people keep doing what they're supposed to be doing,
We'll be alright.
be alright.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're doing okay here. You know, we still go down to the store and stuff pretty easily.
Yeah, I don't care about wearing a mask. I can go shopping just fine.
Yeah. I'm not super keen on it. I don't find them to be very comfortable, but you know, we all gotta go to the store for stuff, so.
But I do kind of like wearing a mask, just for the point of I don't have to smile.
I don't have to smile.
Yeah, like people can't tell if you're, mad or upset. Like you can be irritated with someone, and unless you're actually showing it with your eyes, people will never know.
That's a very interesting observation.
Well, it's true.
Well, I'm not disputing the truth. It's just a very interesting observation.
It's kind of freeing.
Yeah. And then if you're like, I'm gonna rob the place, you're halfway dressed.
Exactly. I always have my beanie on, my sweatshirt, and just gonna bolt it. And actually, I have a neck guard too. I can be completely covered.
Yeah, but any of the places they go, they're gonna be like, are you Katie? No. That was the other person.
It's the other short girl right over there.
That was the other bank robber from earlier.
So Mel said, perfect. I have texted you on Instagram.
Okay,
mentioning
fantastic.
mystery. You can look at my design work.
I would love to.
Yay! I love it.
Yeah, I get a lot of messages on Instagram, and obviously that's where we have the biggest following is on Instagram. So it can get a little bit tricky to get through messages, but I try to get to every single one if I can. It just sometimes takes a while, but if I know about it, it's a whole lot easier to find.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we just hit 77,000 followers on Instagram, which is awesome.
Hang in there, computer. Okay.
It's almost over.
Okay. He keeps saying that. Just believe him. Just believe him.
It's like almost literally true this time.
Dustin Barker says, definitely enjoy watching your video. I also draw cars.
Nice.
More cartoonish using markers and color pencil.
That's awesome.
I've been trying to push for more illustration style of cars.
That is super cool. That'd be really cool to see more people's artwork. That's kind of like maybe where a Patreon could be really useful, because then we can connect with more people and kind of look at more artwork together. You just get lost in the sea of stuff on social media.
Which sometimes happens.
Yeah, and there's even like, there's some really awesome group pages on like Facebook or something like that, but stuff like that tends to get buried kind of quick too, which is a bummer.
There's some nerdy pages that I follow, and I see the same posts over and over, which is kind of annoying.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing for sure. So just doing a quick second pass on these bright white wheel highlights, and then we're off to signature land. What? And then my wife will stop dying.
No, I was just picturing Wizard of Oz with signatures.
With what?
I don't know anymore. I don't know what I'm saying.
Okay.
Angel wants to know, do you like the new Batman and Batmobile, and would you risk to watch movies in theaters with your wife?
That's a good question. Actually, I think the new Batmobile is really cool. I've only gotten to see, I think, 1 or 2 angles of it. I look forward to being able to see, like, all of it. Would I risk the movies? Yeah. It's a good question. I love going to the movies. It's one of my favorite things to do. I just don't know if right now if it's a smart thing to do. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. Alright.
Well, as long as they're cleaning. And also it has to be a really good movie, because even before, we would only go see movies if we really wanted to. Otherwise we just wait.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, I used to see every movie that came out. And they were all pretty terrible.
Yeah, I saw terrible movies because my boyfriend at the time would let me in to whatever movie was out. So if I just wanted to kill time, I could just go hang out in the movie theater.
It's a different time.
It was a different time. I can't do that anymore.
No. But, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely really curious about it. Since, it's another fresh take on a familiar story. I'm almost more like, I would definitely probably go see the new James Bond.
That's gonna be around Thanksgiving, I think.
Yeah, we got a while.
Yeah, I think it's Thanksgiving. And then Top Gun's December, but I have no interest in Top Gun.
Yeah, I can really live without that one. I'm good.
The mom I work for keeps trying to get me to watch the original one, and I'm like, I don't wanna.
Haven't you already seen it?
No.
You haven't seen the original Top Gun?
I have not.
Man, that would have been a great discussion for really early in this video.
Well, no one brought up movies.
Nobody?
I can talk about movies all day long.
Nobody brought up Top Gun. Actually, I kid too. That's like our favorite thing to do is movies.
We like to analyze them. I watch top 10 videos all the time, just on movies and TV shows.
You make a top 10 video of you right now.
Nuh-uh.
No.
No.
Top 10 reasons to go to Taco Bell.
I do have to say this about the new Batman. I think Robert Pattinson is a badass just in the trailer. Holy shit, it looked like he killed a guy.
Have I not seen this trailer?
I showed it to you.
Oh, okay.
No, he was really punching the guy.
I wasn't sure if I missed something.
No, he was just bam, bam. There's
He was just
nothing.
really punching that guy.
He was just really punching super hard.
So punchy right now.
But he looked really emo too, so I don't know. Like
Yeah.
they made Bruce Wayne emo.
Yeah, I'm curious about a lot of the character design decisions, that's for sure. There's only one way to find out.
I am definitely excited for Wonder Woman, though I do think there's a little bit of cleanup with the effects.
That they're probably still working on.
Yeah, it was just the last trailer with Cheetah.
Ah,
She looked very CGI.
it happens.
Creative Goddess, do you ever get a client comments like, wow, this looks fantastic, now can you make the car green?
Oh my god, all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. Because I sell artwork that I do, like a random drawing like this, I'll sell this. Or I also do commissions. But yeah, when I do artwork like this for fun, of course, I'll post it on social media tomorrow. And without a doubt, somebody will be like, wow, just like my car, except mine's red and has different wheels and a different color interior. And I would totally buy it if you changed all these things that are impossible to change at this stage.
Purple dinosaur on the face.
Purple dinosaur on the face. So, yes, that happens a lot. And it used to be irritating. Now it's just silly. You just kind of laugh about it a little bit more.
Now we do those pieces on a computer.
Yeah. Yeah, anybody that wants to change their mind a million times about stuff, those pieces are just finished digitally these days. Because to redo something like this because somebody was like, ooh, so close. No.
Angel said, yeah, the actor playing Batman contracted COVID, so
Yeah, I
the
heard.
production got momentarily shut down. Yeah, I hope they're all safe and they're all good. They're just all in quarantine, just who he was in contact with. So you never know when it's gonna hit you. You gotta wash your hands and wear your mask. Just do what you can.
Do all the things.
Do all the things.
Yeah. Well, guys, I'm sure you are bored to death by now, so I'm going to clean out my highlight paintbrush, add a signature to this guy, and we can all move on with our lives. We actually went longer on this one than a couple of the previous ones. Not my intention. So, sorry about that, but hopefully that means we grab more people and grab those precious view time hours. I don't know.
Does this count?
Does it count? So, here we are, last but not least. Alright, spelled my name right on the first try.
Did you put the star?
My artwork signature is different than my signing for stuff signature.
You don't put the star on there. That's tragic.
Tragic.
It's so tragic right now.
So tragic right now?
Hi Jesus, welcome back. We're getting ready to end the video.
We're actually just getting ready to bounce. I just signed this guy.
Aww.
Nobody died. Came out really, really cool.
Totally dying.
Yeah, this came out awesome. Thank you guys so much. Whether you're here from the way back, when the sun was up, to now, this was awesome. Thank you guys for the great questions. I'll start to put together a more rigid schedule for us doing these so that it doesn't feel as seat of the pants as it is now. But thankfully, the artwork came out pretty darn cool. I'll post it up on social media tomorrow, a nice clean shot. The videos tend to change the coloration look of this, so it actually does look different than it actually looks, but that's just me rambling at this point. Thank you guys so much. You have a good night, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good night, Creative Goddess.
Peace out, Cub Scouts. I don't know what I'm saying. Bye, guys.